Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much. Welcome to the State of the City Economy Conference 2020, the 22nd State of the City Economy Conference. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're looking for seats, there are quite a few over in this corner of the room. We want everybody to be comfortable, so please come and take a seat. My name's Greg Clark. I'm really honoured to be your onstage host again this year. And we have a record number of delegates, 850 people registered. Two, a record number of speakers, 11 speakers in all in the next couple of hours or so. And three, this is the only city, I think, that has consecutively for 22 years done a conference of this kind. So why don't you give yourselves a big round of applause. So it's the year of the European Championships. It's the year of COP26. Allegedly, it's the year of Brexit. We'll see all about that. And let me take this moment to thank, on your behalf, the two conference sponsors, the Glasgow City Innovation District and Jacobs. Let's give them a round of applause, please. Thank you very much. Now, I'm shortly going to introduce the leader of the council, but before I do that, I want to talk to you a little bit about how you can participate and interact in the event. And therefore, I want you to get out your mobile phones. Please, I'd like you to connect to the Wi-Fi network, which is free of charge and doesn't require any sign-in. And then I'd like you to access slido.com, slido.com, or sli.do, slide.do. Either will work. And then the event code for today's event is hashtag SOCE, State of the City Economy Conference 2020. So hashtag SOCE 2020. And I want you to get into Slido, register. Ladies and gents, if you're looking for seats, those in the far corner of the room, plenty of seats for you here. We don't want you to be uncomfortable. This is a great time to come and get a seat. Now, what we're going to do with Slido during the course of the day is that we're going to do polls like the one you can see on your screen. We're going to build some word clouds together. I'm going to ask you your opinions on certain key questions. But really importantly, you're going to ask our keynote speakers and our panelists your questions. You'll be able to propose questions, and you'll also be able to prioritize the questions that others have asked. And this way, we make sure that the questions we put to our panelists are really the ones that you want to hear the answers to, and we'll try to do that in a very efficient way. So let's go back to our opening poll. So once you're into Slido and you've got into SOCE 2020, hands up if you're already in and you can see the app and you can see the poll. Okay, hands up if you're trying to do that right now and are not yet there. Okay, so there's more people still trying, so we're just going to give you a second or two to get yourselves there, because this only works if you're all able to participate. You can see 97 people have already voted. I think we want to get to at least 300 voting, given the size of the number of people in the room. So please try and find your way into the app and try and register your vote on this question of how you got here today. Can we continue to see the vote on the screen, please? Great, so we're sliding along here, as you can see. 38% of you came by train, 25% walked, 23% in the car, 8% on the subway, 2% on the bicycle. Perhaps we might expect a few more people to come by bicycle in the near future. Keep voting, please. We'll wait till we've got to 300 before we close this vote. We're on the way. 40% on the train, 23% walked, 21% in the car. How did you get to the conference today? Keep going. The numbers are moving up rapidly. We've passed 260 now. There's about 600 people in this room, so it'll be nice to have half of you in this poll. We're nearly there. Please keep going. Persist with this, because then we can use it for the rest of the day, knowing that you're all involved. Now, for those of you who know that the conversation about the decarbonisation of cities is all about changing the modal share of transportation. And you can see in this city, 19% of you came in a private car, By city standards internationally, that's actually a very good measure. But in terms of city standards in Europe, that's about average. So there's obviously some room for improvement there. And no doubt we'll talk about that during the course of the day. So thank you very much to all those of you who vote. 43% came by train, 23% walked, roughly 20% in the car. Thank you very much. Let's now go to the second poll. And here what we're going to do is to create a word cloud. So we're asking you just to enter into the app one word. In one word, what theme would you like today's conference to focus on? What's the one word that summarizes the thing that's most on your mind for today's conference? Start putting your words in now. If you see a word that somebody else puts in that you like, you can just vote for that. And of course, I needn't tell you this, but there is an editor looking at the screen. So if anybody puts a rude word in, we're not going to see it on the screen. So let's have a look at the words, if we can. The words beginning to come. You can see growth, innovation, sustainability, inclusion, sustainability growing there, climate, transport, metro, future, regeneration. Keep voting for the words that you like best and or adding the word that makes most sense to you. And you'll see, in a sense, the mind map of the 600 people who are in the room. Sustainability, growth, climate, innovation, inclusion, collaboration, innovation. Fantastic. Let's keep going with this just for a minute or two more. 350 of you have entered your preferred words. We really appreciate that. And we look forward to an amazing year in the city of Glasgow. So let's just freeze this there for a moment. 352 of you. We've got growth, innovation, sustainability, climate, all of the themes that we aim to discuss during the course of the day. We now know what's on your mind. Let's now welcome our first keynote speaker. And it's a great honour for me to introduce Scotland's Local Government Politician of the Year, the leader of the City of Glasgow. Please welcome Councillor Susan Aitken.
Thanks very much, Greg, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the slightly delayed State of the City conference for 2019, taking place in 2020. The event moved from its usual slot for election reasons, but actually it gives us an opportunity not just to reflect on the year that we've left behind, but also to focus on what is going to be a really momentous year for Glasgow, as Greg's already alluded to. In this, the 21st year of the 21st century, the critical role of cities in setting the pace for economic, social and cultural change is crystallised here in Glasgow. Cities like ours have long been incubators for policies and solutions, crucibles for developing, testing and implementing economic models and practical knowledge, and bulwarks against insularity and complacency. They are our cradles of innovation and change, where modern Scotland has always been made and where it is being remade. Probably for the first time, we can be exact about what the change entails and critically what we must do to prepare for, adapt to and thrive within it. Climate change, sustainability and carbon reduction are the issues of our times. They form the context within which our prosperity must continue to flourish. Done right, economic growth, improving the quality of life of all of our citizens and carbon neutrality are entirely compatible. Our road to net zero carbon is signposted with opportunity. The technological innovation for which Glasgow is again becoming renowned, our growing reputation as a centre of the new green economy, and the willingness of the public and private sectors, academia and civil society to mobilise in partnership and collaboration perfectly position us to achieve both economic and environmental sustainability. I mentioned at the outset that the timing of this event gives us a particular focus, and indeed 2020 presents Glasgow with an opportunity of global scale and significance. Just 10 months from now, we host the United Nations Climate Change Conference, better known as COP26, a gathering of some 170 world leaders to push forward global efforts to reduce emissions. It will be the biggest event that Scotland has ever hosted. As the year progresses, we in Glasgow will stage a series of events to raise awareness of COP26, the opportunities that it creates. But make no mistake, this is massive. It will be impossible to ignore. Logistically, COP26 will be a challenge, but the city will keep moving throughout. And as we know, Glasgow is a world-renowned event city. We were chosen as COP26 host because of our track record, because of the excellence of the SEC as a venue and the accommodation available within an hour's travel of the city, but also because of the progress and sustainability made by both Glasgow City Council and the Scottish Government. Based on our past record, I have no doubt that the positive legacy will far outweigh the impact of the challenge. The benefit to our hospitality sector is expected to be more than £70 million, while the international exposure is an unrivalled opportunity to promote the city to new, global and influential audiences. It will also be a platform, though, to promote and accelerate our efforts to transition to carbon neutrality, particularly the challenges and opportunities represented by Glasgow's historic high-density housing and public transport in a city region of our ambition and potential. As host city for the most significant climate change event since the Paris Agreement in 2015, we are ideally placed to position Glasgow as a demonstrator city for sustainability solutions. If emissions from our pre-1919 tenements and the M8 can be cracked, then we'll have set a template that other cities can follow. This is an opportunity for Glasgow to become the city of our times on the issue of our times. It cannot be overstated. The economic is indivisible from the environmental and indeed the social. We need to replace our old industries before they become obsolete. We've been here before with the fallout from the decline of our heavy industries in the past. But as I've said, this time we know what's coming. And if we're to avoid the disastrous social impacts of past experience and ensure a just transition to a decarbonised society, it must be planned for. It's clear we'll need thousands of skilled jobs just to convert Glasgow's homes and communities to their low-emission future. And our partners at Scottish Power are currently preparing the data, as they've already done for the Merseyside region, to quantify how many new jobs will be created by Glasgow's pathway to net zero. And we expect those to be published in the coming weeks. The city economy remains, by and large, in good health and competitive with other UK core cities. GVA has increased by 4% in the past year, up from 19.6 billion last year to 20.4 billion this year. A scan around our skyline will show around 20 cranes at major development sites. We've got almost 1.2 million square feet of office accommodation under construction with a total investment of £562 million. That's over 10 times Edinburgh's equivalent. Since 2012, Glasgow's benefited from over £1.1 billion of foreign direct investment. Our jobs base and our economy continue to grow and diversify. We're home to 48,000 firms, more than a third of Scottish jobs, and we're the second best small city in Europe for SME startups. We make more satellites than any other city outside of Silicon Valley. Our financial districts rate higher than Brussels, Madrid and Milan among sector professionals. And the 230 life sciences companies in the city region turn over £325 million annually. Meanwhile, our creative industries are now generating nearly £1.5 billion a year. And I can't resist a gratuitous mention of Sunday's Golden Globes, where 1917 and Succession, both of which were shot in Glasgow and contributed to our city economy, were among the winners. And later you'll hear from Channel 4's Joe Street, and that broadcaster's decision to locate in Glasgow is evidence of the buoyancy of our screen sector. Even at this early stage of our transition, it's worth highlighting that already Glasgow is home to the UK's second highest proportion of tech firms specialising in low carbon technology outside of London, and the sixth highest in Europe. Our vibrant and growing third sector of over 3,000 organisations makes an invaluable contribution to the city economy, but we've yet to quite understand how to quantify that contribution. So over the coming months, we'll work with the Glasgow Council for the Voluntary Sector and engage the city's research capability to undertake a baseline study to articulate that contribution. We are also in Europe's top 10 cities for overall business friendliness. Our People Make Glasgow branding isn't just a slogan, it clearly has both substance and effectiveness. We rank in the top 15% of European regions for the proportion of working age adults with at least a degree level qualification. We have the best graduate retention levels in the UK outside London. And among the world's mid-sized cities, we are top 5 for the number of international students. And from the unenviable position of having been one of the world's fastest shrinking cities, over the next 15 years, Glasgow's metropolitan population will grow at a faster rate than in Lisbon, Helsinki and Amsterdam, and as fast as New York, Los Angeles and Paris. That the Numbeo Quality of Life Survey rated Glasgow as having the second highest overall quality of life in the UK, just outside Europe's top 10 and within the global top 40. These days, that should surprise no one. But Glasgow remains a city of contrasts. 4 weeks from the election of the new UK government, I hold out little hope for a change of direction in the policies that are intensifying and exacerbating some of Glasgow's deep-rooted social challenges. I see no end to the impact of austerity on our poorest citizens. Turning around generational worklessness, low skills, poor physical and mental health, poverty and economic inequality will continue as the most pressing priorities for my administration. And as no one needs reminding, we're just 3 weeks away from leaving the European Union. Glasgow City Council continues with our preparations, but absolutely nothing has happened to allay my fears about the impact of Brexit in any form on our city, its economy and our communities. Brexit comes as Glasgow's standing as an international city with a global reputation continues to grow. It is critical that remains the case, especially with the eyes of the world soon to fall on us this year. We must continue to build relationships with European and other international colleagues. To that end, in 2019, the Council formed a new Global Glasgow Group, bringing together key partners from university and business leaders, representatives of arts and sciences, energy giants, broadcasters, and our international airport. And that group will tell the new Glasgow story far and wide, building on the soft power of culture and the arts, the success of our innovation ecosystems, the many thousands of ambassadors who've passed through our universities and are scattered across the world, and our location as the gateway to Scotland. In the past few months alone, we've been named the world's leading festival and events destination at the World Travel Awards, the European Capital of Sport for 2023, the first ever city to hold this accolade twice, and the UK's top cultural and creative city. And we are also one of the world's top 5 sustainable tourism destinations. And we know from major investors that these are not just pass-the-parcel awards. They have a real impact on decisions to visit, live and invest here in Glasgow. Neither do these accolades simply happen by accident. They are down to considerable hard work by elected members of the administration, by council officers, and all of those committed to Team Glasgow. And I'm delighted to be able to announce that in recent weeks, we've created the role of and appointed a city marketing manager to help us tell our story, to build on invaluable work done previously for us by Professor Greg Clark, and to improve our position on some of those key global benchmarks and indices. We were also very proud that Glasgow was runner-up for the European Commission's Capital of Innovation for 2019, and that award acknowledged our willingness to use innovative practices to build a healthier, more sustainable and empowered future for the people of Glasgow. And it recognised Glasgow City Region as one of the most creative, diverse and dynamic innovation economies in Europe. And I fully anticipate that our next speaker, Professor MacDonald, will more fully address this, but suffice to say that since I stood here last, the Glasgow City Innovation District, Scotland's first, has been launched. And Professor Muscatelli will no doubt tell us more about the Glasgow Riverside Innovation District, or the GRID, which is supported through the City Deal. And still within the city region, the Advanced Manufacturing and Innovation District for Scotland, or AMIDS, adjacent to Glasgow Airport, will be home to the National Manufacturing Institute of Scotland and the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. One city region, 3 sites of pioneering innovation ecosystems. And the journey from the City Innovation District to AMIDS roughly mirrors that of our river corridor. The City Council, Scottish Enterprise and the Scottish Government have been working in partnership to actively plan for the continuing revitalisation of our riverfront, something that the Cabinet Secretary will tell us more about shortly. The people of Glasgow tell us repeatedly that one of the things which really matters to them is restoring the Clyde back to the heart of the city's life, and that's something that we intend to deliver on. Our new narratives continue to reach new audiences. In September, we hosted the United Nations Glasgow Conference on City Living, with experts from over 50 countries visiting Glasgow to see our neighbourhood regeneration at first hand. It's easy to lose sight of our successes in this space and where we've come from in a short space of time. The demolitions, refurbishments and building programme that followed the 2003 housing stock transfer triggered the biggest physical transformation this city has experienced in generations. It also had a major economic impact, adding £2 billion of GVA to the Scottish economy and supporting thousands of jobs and apprenticeships, as well as bringing many hectares of vacant and derelict land back to life. As the Strategic Housing Authority for the city, in partnership with our network of community-led housing associations, the council is the biggest housing developer in Glasgow. Our investment and the confidence that we show in the potential of Glasgow's neighbourhoods, some of those neighbourhoods that might be considered to have been left behind, that's what then paves the way for the private sector to have the confidence to come in and to help us deliver vibrant, mixed tenure communities for the future. And that progress will be sustained through a continuing commitment by the Scottish Government to fund the building of affordable homes. During my first State of the City Economy speech, I spoke of the need to expand our notions of the traditional city centre to incorporate those neighbourhoods right in its periphery, which have been too often detached from it. And anyone who's recently been to Lauriston, to the Gallowgate or to Anderston can see real progress on that front as new communities begin to emerge. 2 years ago, I also spoke of why good transport connectivity is critical to the success of our city region economy, and I announced the establishment of the Glasgow Connectivity Commission. And the Commission, under the leadership of former UK Government Transport Advisor Professor David Begg, delivered transformative proposals which put transport in the context of inclusion, growth and productivity, proposing projects capable of delivering benefits at local, regional and national scales. And perhaps their most eye-catching proposal, and one that immediately generated widespread excitement and support, was for a city metro to connect our citizens with major employers and destinations, including our city centre. And our ambitions on that front moved forward significantly in September with the publication of the Programme for Government for 2019-20. And that welcomed the Connectivity Commission report and the ambitious vision that it set out. It committed the Scottish Government to working with partners to consider the Commission's recommendations and, crucially, it pledged to consider the potential for a Glasgow Metro. And in recent weeks, the momentum to advance a first stage Metro proposal has been tangible. Our partners at Renfrewshire Council agree that Metro should be a priority project, with the initial phase connecting Paisley with Glasgow Airport and AMIDS. Funding is already available for that through our existing City Deal commitment. The next step is a plan for how to connect that first spur into the wider southwest corridor, a population and economic growth area that includes key destinations such as the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, Braehead and Renfrew, the largest town in Scotland without its own rail connection. I'm very pleased, therefore, that a strategic group has been established through which those lead local authorities can engage directly with Transport Scotland during the feasibility period and benefit from their advice on key issues. We want that feasibility work to conclude this year, so it's ready for consideration within the second Strategic Transport Projects Review for Scotland, due to be published early in 2021. That will identify those nationally significant projects which Transport Scotland and the Scottish Government will commit to deliver across the next 2 decades. The case for a Glasgow Metro is compelling. It's not just about connectivity to the airport, vital though that is. It is a green infrastructure project that will deliver benefits for communities and businesses right across the city and the city region. And with the potential to support large-scale modal shift, it will signal our intention to meet our carbon neutrality targets by investing in modern, sustainable transport systems. And it will help take Glasgow to the next level, closing the 40-year gap with our European and global competitor cities, which have invested heavily in public transport and infrastructure during that period. That's why it has the support not only of both local authorities, but also the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce and, very importantly, Glasgow Airport. And just yesterday, it was hugely encouraging to hear the First Minister in Parliament reiterate the Scottish Government's support for Glasgow as we take our Metro plans forward. And as we seek the investment to deliver Metro, we will talk not only to national government, but also to local, regional and global investors with the vision to see the benefits to their business of being associated with this transformative project. Above all, we believe the case for a Metro is compelling because, as this nation's only true metropolitan area, it's Glasgow's turn. Our city centre, a totem of Glasgow's post-industrial renaissance, is again an attractive proposition for investment and development. The Council's research shows that the range and quality of shops remain a major attraction, and most shoppers eat or drink during their shopping trip, and well over half, I'll say that again, well over half of visitors arrive by public transport. For our nighttime economy, 90% of respondents think the city centre is a fun and exciting place to visit, and almost 80% view it as one of the best cities in Britain. Challenges, though, remain. The number of retail enterprises has declined, in line with our competitors, while there's been a slight reduction in the frequency of visits to our nighttime offer. And of course, there's a wider context to that. The structural flux impacting UK high streets continues to accelerate. Town centre adaptation to change is still in its infancy. It's a term you'll hear me and council officers use a lot these days, but placemaking will be pivotal for the future of Glasgow city centre. We need flexibility of approach to continue moving away from ingrained ideas of space as being for specific uses and embrace the need to mix uses: commercial, residential, retail, leisure, creative and cultural, public services and open space in all parts of the city centre and indeed the city. Placemaking is about livability, connectivity and attractiveness, and it's these which will help drive inclusive, sustainable growth and business resilience. The completion of the Sucky Hall Street Avenues project is an example of what the application of placemaking principles can achieve. And as well as making our streets healthier and more vibrant, the Avenues programme is a linchpin of our plans to remedy the legacy of our high carbon past and progress towards that greener, more sustainable economy. In recent months, we've engaged in a public consultation regarding the future of George Square. And it's clear that people want our main square to be an accessible, people-centred civic space, and there is overwhelming support for significantly reduced traffic around the square. That is a message that we will act upon, and in the weeks ahead we'll publish the details of our response to the George Square consultation. Taken with the new Queen Street station, which looks more impressive by the week, within a few years, Glasgow will have the civic space that it has long deserved. And the council will be bolder with our limited powers, such as compulsory purchase orders, for tackling dereliction and restoring and maintaining the fabric of the city. We will keep talking to the Cabinet Secretary and his colleagues in the Scottish Government about securing more powers for local government, especially cities, to respond swiftly and nimbly to the threats and opportunities which present themselves. But there must also be honesty about the expectations we have of partners and local businesses who all have a stake in the city centre's success. The scale of this task means the council cannot tackle it alone. Businesses, developers, property owners all must play their part, and we will be asking you to step up to the task. Some might wonder why sustainability, climate change and decarbonisation have featured so heavily at a city economic event, although obviously not this audience who made it their priority in the poll that Greg conducted at the beginning. The imminence of COP26 is clearly at the forefront of our plans and our thinking, but it goes deeper and far beyond that particular 10 days in November. In the 21st century, the kind of dynamic and resilient economy we are growing in Glasgow and want to keep growing must also be an economy for the climate. The two are indivisible. Our near northern neighbour city in Copenhagen is a case in point. It's a pioneer in sustainability, and it's no coincidence that Copenhagen regularly ranks so highly in indices of livability, quality of life and economic performance. I firmly believe that Glasgow can match that ambition and achievement, combining a green and inclusive urban environment with a green and inclusive economy. Working with other cities globally, in implementing bold policies for decarbonisation, we can ensure a just transition for our own citizens and also for those citizens across the world, particularly in the global south, who are already suffering loss and damage from climate change. I have no doubt that this city has the collective will, knowledge and courage to make that happen. Cities must lead the way to a sustainable future for our planet, and Glasgow should lead the way among cities. A recent article in the New York Times praised the spirit of this city as humane, political, refusenik. That's what the world thinks of Glasgow. Let's live up to it and bring all of those qualities to the fore as we face the challenges ahead. Thanks very much for listening.
Susan, thank you very much indeed. It's an agenda, I think, of breathtaking ambition and progress. And anybody in the room who was busily taking notes, as I was, who will have written 170 world leaders in the city, using decarbonisation as a catalyst for prosperity, for sustainability, for livability. the whole idea of a city regional metro to underpin not just the carbon shift, but the productivity shift, it's absolutely breathtaking, and I salute you and applaud you. Ladies and gentlemen, we're really deeply honoured and blessed today to have not one, but two Vice-Chancellors and Principals of Glasgow's leading universities and seats of learning. Many of you will know that the University of Strathclyde was awarded the designation of Scotland's University of the Year. Some of you will also know that it was awarded UK University of the Year. Not all of you will know, I think, that it's the first university ever to be awarded UK University of the Year twice. And so, as we welcome Professor Sir Jim MacDonald, the Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Strathclyde, let's give them congratulations on that amazing achievement. Jim.
Thank you very much, Greg, Cabinet Secretary, Mr Mackay, Councillor Aitken, ladies and gentlemen. I'm absolutely delighted to be here at this fantastic event, and I think, as Councillor Aitken mentioned, the turnout, I think, is indicative of the vibrancy of your connectivity to what is Scotland's and Glasgow's great ambition to create economy, but in so doing, bring the city's citizens with us. Of course, this is the 22nd consecutive conference. Again, another fantastic testimony to what an old teacher of mine used to say in Govan, the stickability of the city in terms of not getting along with the fad of writing down policies around economic strategy and putting them in the drawer. It's about the commitment and the reality of what we're trying to do. And if you look around you, not only in this room, but across the city and in the west of Scotland in particular, you can see and you can actually feel and sense this notion of excitement, ambition, and as Susan pointed out to us, the reality of the data and the evidence that's building up tells us everything we need to know about Scotland and Glasgow playing their full part on the international stage. Around 10 years ago, I was approached by the City and the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce to take on the role as independent chair of the Economic Commission. We were all just coming out of the first major hit of the economic downturn. Glasgow, rather than pulling down the baton and waiting till the wave would pass, decided to get its metaphoric surfboard out, get on top of that wave and try to find out where it might take us. If we were bold enough to have a look at our assets, be keen about the ambition that we shared, and have the truth about the challenges that we faced. I took on that opportunity with three very senior Scottish business leaders, and indeed the inimitable Liz Cameron, who was a fellow commissioner, produced a report for the city, and one of those recommendations, all of which they implemented, I have to say to their credit, was the notion of creating a Glasgow Economic Leadership Board, and that survives to today. In fact, Susan and I are co-chairs of that board. Mr Mackay, in fact, was one of the very early visitors right into his new term as Cabinet Secretary, working together, very importantly, led by business and industry, working alongside civic and public leadership and connected to the universities. Anton led the higher and further education workstream out of that activity. So it was really the city coming together, universities, colleges, business, industry, and all of the agencies. And key to that also was the National Economic Development Agency, Scottish Enterprise, who gave us great platforms to see Glasgow's economy in the context of the nation at large. So GEL, as it's called, continues. In fact, we've broadened out the work streams that covers. We naturally continue with engineering and technology, life sciences, finance and business services, tourism and events, which is an absolutely key part of our economic landscape these days. But we've added more recently digital economy and the creative economy as well. Very important given the strength of what we have. And again, on an asset base, what an outstanding capability we have alongside that, life sciences and many others, not least of which higher and further education. But as we grow, of course, we need to see applying the principles of enlightened self-interest, companies and organisations moving forward, but we want to do that in an inclusive way. So what I see in this city is leadership that is socially progressive, and that's important. We need that big picture of building our economy, but of course growth is a challenge when we put that alongside sustainability, but with the stimulus of COP26 and the eyes of the world on this city, because after the challenges of Madrid, moving the conference from Santiago, Chile, By the way, I was in Santiago the night that the Troubles started. Felt like a very rough night in Sauchiehall Street, but so I told them just to calm down, it'll be all over in a few weeks. Having moved COP25 from Santiago to Madrid, I think there was a little bit of a disappointment with the outcomes, and what that does do, which is a double-edged sword, but nonetheless it's a challenge we need to face, is step up the pressure that will be on the Glasgow meeting to come out with something important. But I'm pleased to say that the Scottish Government's commitment to low-carbon energy has made it an exemplar of policy and commitment to delivery. So I look forward to that going forward. So GEL itself continues, but what we've recognised recently is that everyone is talking about innovation, but you'll get 101 different definitions. The City of Glasgow and Scotland itself is beginning to show what innovation actually means, how it can drive job creation, how it can give you a platform for foreign direct investment, how it gives you an opportunity to build supply chains and very innovative SMEs, critical part of our economy. And all of that, of course, is built into the new Glasgow Economic Strategy, which I commend to, and I congratulate the City for having generated that. It shows ambition, boldness, and the credibility of already being heavily involved in delivery. And of course, that's the important aspect of driving productivity and wages, driving training and job opportunities, and very importantly, making sure that the city can realise its full potential. So as we enter this third decade of the 21st century, we are, as we know, experiencing a time of unprecedented challenge. The unambiguous and unavoidable truth about climate change is there. The naysayers that have been an embarrassment for decades are now beginning to quieten down as we see the reality of what potentially 2% or 2 degrees increase in global temperature can actually mean for us. But again, Glasgow, and again, credit to Susan and partner Scottish Power, have made a commitment to make Glasgow one of the UK's first net zero carbon cities. And Scotland has made a commitment. As Mr Mackay knows, I co-chair the Scottish Government's Energy Advisory Board with the First Minister, has committed to bring forward the net zero targets to 2045 or better. But that seems like a long time away. But the decisions that we have to be now. Implementation needs to start now. And this city has an opportunity to be a genuine national and international leader. So nonetheless, as a city and an economy, we're getting ready for Brexit. As an avowed and unambiguous Europhile, I still remain disappointed. But as an engineer, I have to apply the pragmatism of getting on with it, seeking opportunities and looking for our competitive advantage. And that will be done by having a very clear economic strategy, a deep commitment to collaboration, and exploiting our city and our national assets. And that's our people, our business base, our universities, and our colleges too. It's important that while we might be leaving the EU, Glasgow will always remain a proud European city, and we should never forget that. The political flux, struggling from a euphemism there, the political flux that we face, we'll have to cut our way through, but absolutely taking the confidence of the Scottish Government strategy through all of this, its agencies and this proud city, we have an opportunity, even in that turmoil, to get a better position through all of this. And as you all know, I'm a proud Glaswegian, as many of you are. We should do what we always have done, and that's embrace change, address the challenges, and engage with the wider world to forge our own path. And our strength, of course, is our people. The motto that you see all over the city that's now morphed to People Making Glasgow. People understand the authenticity of that. Whilst they went through a very detailed consultation exercise, that feels real. It feels right. And we're once our strength in this city, in economic power lay in tobacco and the cotton trade, in coal mines and steel mines, and locomotive manufacturing, shipbuilding. Today and tomorrow, our fortunes are absolutely deeply seated in the quality of our people, the ability to engage them in their journey, and also to add to that innovation, investment, and the agility and courage to make a difference. And as we rightly say, people do make Glasgow. It's our people, their knowledge and skills which will drive the economy and our prosperity. And we have every right to be confident. And that's a word I would like to see up on that Wordle that Greg shared with us. Let's be confident. Too many other parts of this nation and other parts of the world are hunkering down. You know, Glasgow and Scotland needs to stand up tall, be confident not only of our historical heritage, but what we're doing now. And perhaps we're just a little bit too shy in this city, in this country, about, bragging's a harsh word, but we have the right to build a burgeoning bragging book. There's a lot going on in this city and in your organisations, as well as in the strategies that surround it. So let's get about it. And I'll take a few moments just to talk about our universities and colleges. An enormous asset for this city, and perhaps it's become part of the wallpaper of this city. We take them for granted. We have over 200,000 students in this city, from Glasgow University, Strathclyde, Glasgow Caledonian University, our colleges. A fantastic, vibrant, in the main, young workforce that are excited. They want to be here, and hopefully with a bit more of an enlightened immigration strategy, they might actually get to stay here and help build industry and help make Scotland an exemplar world city for the 21st century. But it's important that we recognise that our universities and colleges rank amongst the best in the world. Just a few brief statistics. And for example, I select these out of a bragging book that Greg and many of his colleagues around the jail board have been generating over recent months. Glasgow is the only UK city with 2 universities ranked in the global top 300 QS rankings. There are 25,000 plus universities in the world, so believe you me, that is no mean feat. We're the only city out with London to have 2 universities in the UK top 40, the Centre for World University Rankings. And the 2 principals of those universities are in the hall with you today. Strathclyde Business School and the Adam Smith Business School at Glasgow are among only 1% of the business schools globally that are triple accredited, which talks about quality, relevance and impact in terms of producing great talent and supporting business growth. Glasgow Caledonian University is a chartered institute for securities, specialising in financial services, operations and risk, and one of only 3 universities out with London capable of doing that. And not only the universities that are world class. The Glasgow School of Art, the oldest art school in the UK, ranks in the top 8 globally for art and design. Design really started in this city. Janice Kirkpatrick, who's a force of nature from Graven Images, she talks about the High Street in the mid-18th century had been the place where we had the start of design technology, which led to fantastic print capability and manufacturing. Let's not forget that, but let's modernise that through digital and creative technology. And we should be proud of the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, ranking in the global top 20 for performing arts and in Europe's top 10, plus our fantastic colleges. These are not just super colleges in scale, they're super colleges in terms of what they do. City of Glasgow, Clyde and Kelvin, each with their own distinctive specialisations, be that in maritime and engineering and fashion, the strong heritage of technical skills and strong links to the city's universities via not just articulation agreements, but deep strategic partnerships, building a workforce, such as through the programme that we run at Strathclyde called the Engineering Academy, and partner with the colleges I've just mentioned. So there's no doubt that in an increasingly knowledge-driven and innovation-led economy, Glasgow's universities and colleges are key assets that we are exploiting, but we need to centralise into the strategy of what we're doing. And that's about including inclusive growth, but also putting innovation to the heart of what we do. Our colleges and universities give Glasgow a real competitive edge in the quality of their people and their skills. I think you heard Susan mentioning that Glasgow ranks in the top 15% of EU regions for the proportion of working-age adults with at least a degree-level qualification. That's a big derivative of, as Steve Dunlop and his colleagues at SC know now, as well as investment and placemaking, which is critical, the quality of the people and the skilled workforce and the ability to translate the excellence of our research base into innovation and productivity growth is absolutely pivotal. And we're well poised now to push on from here. Our universities and colleges produce the workforce skills that attract and retain businesses. We're ranked number 1 of the 10 UK core cities for producing the most financial, business and digital tech students and graduates. And also we are world class in research. Anton will also mention this. Being no doubt that the research that we conduct in this city, whether it's engineering, science and business, social sciences and indeed humanities, is amongst the very best in the world. And that allows us to attract excellent academic talent in their teams, great undergraduates and postgraduates, and early career researchers. And that, again, is the magnet that brings investment into the city. In short, our universities are some of Glasgow's most international assets, and they're increasingly playing their part alongside the Glasgow City Council itself, UK, Scottish Government, its agencies such as Scottish Enterprise, and crucially, the private sector, because let's not forget this. This is not just the government's challenge. It's everyone's challenge. That's why the euphemism of the triple helix approach to dealing with these large-scale problems is critical. We need the policymakers and our political leaders to set out the challenge, define the problem space, but we need all of us to move into the solution space. Industry, business, large and small, and of course the universities and colleges. And we're a resilient city. You've heard from the leader of the city that we have innovation districts emerging. And there's a lot going around this, even in the UK context. We know the outcome of the UK election now, and there has been a growing commitment, at least it's been talked about a potential doubling in the UK of funding for research and innovation. Scotland does much better than its proportional expectation because of the quality of what we do in research and colleges. And this city in particular, so the universities and colleges I've mentioned, are able to step up to that. We also have, without boring you with all of the detail, with an entity called UK Research and Innovation, which coordinates all of research and economic development activities in the UK level. We have Scottish Funding Council and Scottish Enterprise here. But our colleagues in London are talking about setting up an entity called ARPA, which is based on the UK model about Advanced Research Projects Agency. Now, we're talking about putting £5 billion plus a year into that space, which is about translating research into innovation activities, funding companies, and building up the D in R&D. The universities are well placed there. So very briefly, let me give you the headlines. You've heard about the Glasgow City Innovation District. Strathclyde is proud to be the anchor of that at the far end of George Street in the junction with High Street. In there, with our partners, the city itself, Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, Scottish Enterprise, Entrepreneurial Scotland, we're building on already established capability. Over £100 million in the TIC building, co-funded by ourselves, Scottish Enterprise, Scottish Funding Council, and alongside the Innovo building. We're working on low-carbon energy, pharmaceuticals, photonics and laser technology, and now building, over the past 5 years, a programme approaching £200 million, much of which is funded by business and industry in itself. And the UK needs to do better in that metric. One of the UK targets, I know Mr Mackay is close to defining these numbers. Currently we spend only about 1.7% of GDP on R&D in the UK. That needs to grow to about 2.4% for us to be really competitive. And Glasgow can be a real engine for that growth. If we do make that growth in the next 7 years, that will be an additional £15 billion going into R&D and industrial innovation, something that will really drive the economy and create jobs. But of course, GCID is also looking at horizon industries. That includes quantum technology, health technology, space. Did you know Glasgow has one of the biggest and most powerful space tech sectors in the whole of Europe? Also looking at 5G communications, AI, and 5G communications. And many thanks to the Scottish Government for the investment in the new 5G Innovation Centre here in Scotland, involving Strathclyde and Glasgow universities, which will be launched properly in the coming months. We also have Anton and our colleagues at Glasgow innovating down at the Glasgow Riverside Innovation District. Anton will say a little bit more about that. Here we have the established first centre in the centre of Glasgow, GRID as it's called, coming up fast, and just outside the city, but dependent very heavily on the power of Glasgow's universities, colleges, and the collection around the City Deal investment. We have AMIDS. Mr Mackay and I smile often about the amount of acronyms that are built around that. He himself has been the principal champion for this in Scottish Government, the Advanced Manufacturing Institute for Scotland, recapturing Scotland's historical capability in manufacturing, not cheap assembly, build them fast and cheaply and then move on. This is about high-value manufacturing. And with the investment of the Scottish Government, its agencies, and the City Deal is about to make, we're talking about almost £300 million worth of capital investment out near the airport, and which will take full advantage of the new transport infrastructure that Susan talked about. And out there already we have long-standing partners such as Rolls-Royce, Boeing, Spirit Aerospace have just joined us, Siemens are there with the new Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre. We also have GSK and AstraZeneca. So in all of this, we look to push forward. So let me conclude by saying it's cold and windy outside. That's probably true metaphorically. But the power of Glasgow's history, the strength of Scotland's ambition are major assets we all need to key into. As we go forward in the next few years, and we have to move quickly because others will have similar ambitions, we have to take the strength and encouragement of what we have in terms of assets. There's an enormous evidence base of our capability. The bragging book is there. We need to talk more about it, and I'm sure we're going to share more of that. Susan is an absolute force of nature when it comes to getting the Glasgow story out there and use all of this. It's not just for the city to brag about the city, it's for all of you, particularly all of you in the room, to take that message forward. And no doubt Glasgow's universities and colleges are fully keyed into the strategy. Many of us have contributed significantly to it. I look forward to the next chapter in Glasgow's history, and be no doubt the University of Strathclyde will be positioning itself as strong as it can to support Glasgow's next economic growth chapter. Thank you very much indeed.
Jim, thank you very much indeed. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a quick show of hands on two of the issues that Jim raised. Who's in favour of Glasgow being even more self-confident? If you are, raise your hands. Who's against that? Names and addresses, please. Who believes that it would be helpful to have an immigration policy that allows people who study in Glasgow to also work in Glasgow? If you do, please raise your hands. Okay, if you don't, again, raise your hands. There's no hands raised, Jim, so we're on the way. Now, I said that we're blessed to have two Vice-Chancellors with us, and the accolades and awards that the University of Glasgow has won over the past period of time are too numerous to mention. But one thing does stand out, that only 2 days ago, the University of Glasgow celebrated its 569th birthday. So as we welcome to the stage Professor Sir Anton Muscatelli, we're going to sing Happy Birthday to the University of Glasgow. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, University of Glasgow. Happy birthday to you. Please give Sir Anton a big round of applause.
Well, Greg, thank you very much. I wasn't expecting that, I must confess, when I accepted this invitation. But Cabinet Secretary, Leader of the Council, ladies and gentlemen, delighted to be here. And as Jim said, we are doing a bit of a double act today, and you're getting 2 University Vice-Chancellors, so it's the academic equivalent of dry January for you. But actually, it is quite symbolic. I think the fact that Jim and I are sort of speaking in sequence here, I think captures the theme I'd like to major on in my contribution this morning, which is collaboration. And I think Councillor Aitken outlined persuasively in an opening address. Glasgow has much to be positive about, and the city government has a really compelling economic strategy with a really clear vision on how to achieve sustainable growth and inclusive growth. As you've heard, over the last 5 years, the number of businesses in the city have grown by 13%. Outside London, this is now the 3rd most popular city in the UK to buy a home in. And this year, the eyes of the world, as we've heard, will be on Glasgow because of COP26 and also the Euro Championships. And I've already bought my tickets, by the way, so I hope you're on the case as well. And yet, of course, despite the fact that the city enters the 2020s with reason for real optimism, there is much more to be done, I think, to harness sustainable growth and deliver for the people of Glasgow. And I would like to use my slot this morning to argue that there remains scope, I think, for greater collaboration, both within and between sectors, and indeed across this whole city region, to refine our strategic thinking about how the sometimes disparate elements of the city economy can be connected more effectively. And I think this echoes what Susan was saying a moment ago, and Jim as well. I'm an economist by training, as you'll gather, and I cannot help but take a long-term view when reflecting on the city today. It's been almost 40 years since the potential of Glasgow City Centre was published by the urbanist Gordon Cullen and the consultants McKinsey. And the report commissioned by the then Scottish Development Agency, the antecedent of Scottish Enterprise, sought to chart a path towards realising the economic and physical potential of Glasgow city centre. And at that stage, of course, the city was coping with the problems of deindustrialisation and the shift from a manufacturing to a services-led economy. And it's worth recalling just what that history is, because between 1961 and 1981, over 142,000 jobs were shed from the city, a quarter of total employment. As a result, 1/3 of the population in Glasgow, in the city of Glasgow, upped sticks and left. A startling statistic made all the more damaging by the fact that this flight was made up predominantly of the young and the most educated. And for those who stayed, of course, the ripple effects were prolonged and profound. They materialized in a myriad of ways, from poor health outcomes to a lack of inward investment at the time, to the struggle of attracting businesses and events to come to Glasgow. Now, all that heritage can't just be washed away, but the city, as Susan and others have said, is now a very, very different place. It's been turned around by decades-long focus on regeneration and strategic growth. A joint endeavour shared between Glaswegians, stakeholders, succession of city administrations, government agencies, and of course business and other stakeholders. And now, as Susan said, just as we see population growth across European cities beginning to taper off, Glasgow is now bucking the trend. Over the next 15 years, our metro population, as we've heard, is projected to grow faster than European capitals such as Amsterdam and Lisbon, and as fast as New York and Paris. Increasingly, we are recognized the world over as a beacon for talent. Recently crowned a top cultural and creative centre in the UK by the European Commission, and home to a growing cohort, as Jim said, of international students. It's absolutely remarkable, 200,000 students in Glasgow. But importantly, tens of thousands of these students are coming from all over the world. And, as has been said, if we could persuade them to stay and work here, that will be a huge magnet for talent. If I look at my own institution, the University of Glasgow, 13% of our total workforce, 21% of our academics actually are European citizens, are EU citizens. Something to think about in the context of Brexit, and we're constantly having to ensure that that talent remains here. But let's not linger on the clouds on the horizon, such as Brexit. I think Jim is right. We need to think about the optimism around this. And I think, as Councillor Aitken has identified, the city now has a more skilled population than ever before, so we are starting from a very good base. We boast a critical mass of companies and a wide variety of sectors. Jim reeled off the number of companies that are now establishing real R&D activity in the city. We're not simply what we were in the 1980s, which is a pole of attraction for manufacturing, but it was largely production, not R&D. We're now a focus for R&D. And I think we now have a real opportunity from in a whole variety of sectors, from the financial services to the creative industries, from tourism and events to higher education. There's so much that is good and so much that is exciting taking place in Glasgow that actually the problem today is actually simply keeping up with everything that's going on. And it's a challenge that I, as a principal of a world-changing, world-leading university, I'm very familiar with. And one of the many joys of my job is staying on top of the sheer volume of different things that we do, the variety of expertise at our disposal. And in fact, I think a point that Jim made is really important. We have a variety of sectors that we are focusing on at the moment, but we don't know where the future will come. And we know that with the drive towards the green economy, there will be some surprises. So we cannot even stay still and simply say, here are 5 or 6 sectors we're focusing on. That has to be constantly renewed. And if I look at my own institutions, as I say, even looking at the change in the last few years around medical research, what we're talking about now bears almost no relation to what we were doing 5 years ago around areas like cancer, around precision medicine. It's changed completely. So we've got to be constantly innovating. And as Jim said, the same can be said about other universities in the city and indeed across the college sector. But again, whilst it's right that we celebrate the success of our higher education and further education institutions, I can assure you that we have no intention to rest on our laurels. I think we can do more around skills. My university has just launched its first graduate apprenticeship program. We're a bit behind there in terms of what Strathclyde's been doing for a number of years. But it's really exciting when you see how we're transforming the way in which we do skills. Our GA, our graduate apprenticeship degree course in software engineering, has attracted a huge amount of attention, with double the subscribed numbers we were expecting, with sector partners ranging from Barclays to the NHS Scotland. And I think, again, we need to step up to the challenge that that industry places on us, that they need different kinds of training for the 21st century. And again, it's incumbent on institutions like my own to respond to that demand. And whether it's graduate apprenticeships or skills academies or other forms of training, we've got to be responsive to that. I think the links between industry and universities are absolutely vital to meeting the challenges of the future. There's no way in which we will achieve those targets we're setting ourselves around zero net carbon economy by 2045 or earlier if possible, as the city is trying to push for, without those links between industry and academia. So we need to be absolutely clear in recognizing that if we want to drive that research into greater innovation, we've got to work much harder on that, much harder, even though we are successful in some of the innovation areas, which I'll come to in a moment. The innovation districts, and Jim referred to this already, I think have been a remarkable event, the establishment of these innovation districts in the city. The establishment of the Glasgow City Innovation District that has been launched recently, which has been based on the work that Strathclyde started with the TIC, and then, of course, the work out in Renfrewshire with the AMIDS and the National Manufacturing Institutes, I think has really set the gold standard, not just in this city, but I think across the UK. And I'll tell you a bit in a moment about what we've been trying to do around the Glasgow Riverside Innovation District. But it's not simply about seeing these things as individual projects. It's about seeing them as a connected asset for the city economy. And actually, it's more than that, because it's also about joining up our capabilities. So while Strathclyde, of course, is the anchor institution, not only for the City Innovation District, but also for AMIDS and NMIS, and the University of Glasgow has been developing GRID, we are not dealing with different projects here. Because the only way we're going to persuade a big company like Siemens or Canon or to move into this area, as we've done before, and to stay here, and not repeat the mistakes of the 1980s, is by joining up those capabilities. It's about doing more than simply creating a set of projects. So let me tell you a bit more about GRID. It's centered on a Clyde Waterfront Innovation Campus, which acronym is QUIC. It's based on brownfield sites in Govan, located within the Glasgow Riverside Innovation District. QUIC aims to turn empty space into a thriving cluster of innovation activity, creating thousands of high-quality jobs in an area which still feels the effects of the loss of shipbuilding and heavy industry. The two main nodes of QUIC will be a new and enhanced James Watt Nanofabrication Centre, and the JWNC is already the leading research clean room in the UK, which we have at the University of Glasgow. It's one of a handful of leading laboratories worldwide that have pioneered in miniaturization of photonics and quantum devices. Institutions like Stanford, like Caltech, actually ask us to produce some of those devices for them, which shows you the quality of what we have. And the second element is a precision medicine living lab, which builds on the collaborative work already being undertaken at the Clinical Innovation Zone based at the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital. QUIC has already received considerable backing from the city government, being earmarked for city deal funding, and it's received early stage support from Scottish Government and support from Scottish Enterprise as well. And given the ambition of the project and the contribution that it will make to the community in Govan and the wider Central Belt, I'm hopeful that the momentum behind QUIC and GRID will continue to build, and that we receive backing at all levels to realise this ambitious project on the Clyde. Now, as has been said, underpinning all this stands the idea of place-based growth. This might sound wonkish, but the idea is very simple. For a long period, people-based policies have been in vogue. You invest in attracting the right people, encourage their activities, And so the theory growth will follow. But the rise in spatial inequality, the growing disparity across regions, and the political backlash that has engendered, indeed, it's probably at the heart of Brexit, has convinced many economists of the need to embrace place-based economic policies instead. One of the advantages in focusing on place is the emphasis it puts on civic responsibility. That whilst our respective organisations may operate on a national or international scale, we recognise that our location, our connection to Glasgow, is central to our identity, and that our approach to growth must serve the community at large. And this is why, certainly, we as a university have committed to a civic university agreement in partnership with the city government. And I think this shift in economic policy making towards a focus on place is finding more and more advocates. And you only, again, as Jim reflected, you only need to look at some of the announcements that the UK government is making to see evidence of that. And I think for Glasgow, there's much virtue in continuing to focus on place. Because first, we have evidence that it works. Placemaking is increasingly a feature of successful economies, whether you look at cities like Barcelona and Pittsburgh that have emerged from industrial decline and are seeking to develop integrated strategies for urban regeneration and growth. And as Susan pointed out, it's not just about the economic dimension, it's also about transport, connectivity. You have to get all of these things right to make it work. Secondly, a focus on regional economic development lends itself to establishing world-class hubs rather than more fragmented projects spread across different localities. And third, such an approach should give rise to agglomeration benefits. As higher education institutions, further education institutions, government, the public and private sector work together to establish cutting-edge and distinct hubs that use large urban areas to their advantage, hence the concept of the Clyde. I think the challenge for us, as I say, is to drive greater collaboration, accelerate these efforts, and sustain the necessary momentum to realise the tangible benefits that lie within Glasgow's grasp. But I think even if we agree that the economic argument for encouraging different actors to work together is strong, an issue remains: are we doing enough to turn these words into practical reality? And how can Glasgow work collectively to develop projects on the scale and ambition necessary to capture hearts, minds, and large-scale investment? And I think that's a crucial question, and one we must address very clearly. I spent a bit of time thinking about this because I was asked by the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Economy and Fair Work, Mr. Mackay, who is your headline speaker today, to look at how we can maximise the economic impact of what universities do for the economy. And and that report was launched in December, and whilst elements of the resulting report focus on AHE, the broader thrust on how to ensure Scotland marshals its skills and expertise to realise its full potential apply to the whole economy, so it applies to industry and others. And indeed, the central recommendation of that study is that the innovation agenda must become a shared national mission for Scotland, for industry, for universities, for government, for agencies, across the board. There is already a Scottish Government target for business R&D growth, but the report argues that we should go further than that we should declare a shared national mission, not just of Scottish Government, but of universities, government agencies, industry and key partners. Now, the report goes into more detail about what that might look like, but the defining strand is collaboration. Simply put, we all have to work together in the national interest. Modern economies are far too competitive for us simply to be looking for some competitive edge in a sectoral way. And whilst there are already good relationships, as has been pointed out, I think we can do more in terms of dealing with some of the information and coordination issues that we face. And let me just highlight a couple of examples. We could work as universities much closer with the enterprise agencies and indeed SDI to attract R&D intensive foreign direct investment into Scotland. We could work much closer as universities in spin-outs and commercialisation activities. We could benefit with a more collaborative focus. And relevant stakeholders could work much more closely with SDI and the Directorate for International Trade in Scottish Government on our export strategy. Ultimately, when it comes to leveraging external funding from the UK or international sources, whether as Glasgow or as Scotland as a whole, we will only succeed if we're able to work together and if we, in partnership with city government and national government, are able to agree on our national priorities. As the person who chairs the City Deal Economic Growth Commission, I think that's one of the key lessons that emerges from that. And of course, we do have headwinds at the national level I think Jim put it very nicely. There are continued uncertainties on Brexit, but it's going to happen now. And we need to look at that trade deal that's going to emerge and make sure we can turn it to our advantage. And we have the most knotty economic problem of our time, the slowdown and flatlining of productivity that we need to address. Unless we address that, frankly, all the other efforts will not come to pass. And we need to do that by matching skills to the jobs of the future. So there are plenty of issues on the horizon, yet all of this notwithstanding, I think it's worth ending where I began by, again, stating that Glasgow enters the 2020s with reasons for real optimism and the potential to realize a goal that I believe all of us share, of a city that is even more sustainable, vibrant and productive than we have today. Thank you very much.
Anton, thank you very much indeed. So much in your speech to reflect on, your final remarks about flat productivity, the role of innovation, your very wide-ranging remarks about placemaking and its contribute to agglomeration and city growth, the points you were making about the need for collaboration in order to compete. But two questions that Anton raised where I'd like to see what the room thinks. Firstly, he said there are reasons to be optimistic that the three innovation districts working together can form a network for change in the city. How many people think that optimism can be realised? Do you agree with that proposition? If you do, let's see your hands. Okay, if you're sceptical about that, let's see you. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. There's a few people in the room, so people remain to be convinced. Anton said that he was confident that we could get to net zero carbon in the city by 2045. Who shares that confidence? Who agrees? You feel confident about that? Okay, who's less confident about that? Okay, more people less confident than actually confident. So thank you very much indeed. Much work to be done in that space. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before I introduce our keynote guest, let me tell you we are running a bit late. I apologise for that, as I'm sure do the speakers, but we've just decided to continue with our agenda as it is. Every speaker we have on the platform today is important to us. We want you to hear their voices. We want you to have your Q&A. So we will be ending about 15 minutes late as we plan at the moment. I hope you'll bear with us. We apologise for that. But it's now a great pleasure to introduce Scotland's Politics and Business Politician of the Year, Cabinet Secretary for Finance, Economy and Fair Work. Please welcome our guest of honour, our keynote speaker, Cabinet Secretary Derek Mackay.
Well, thank you, Greg, for that very warm welcome in using my title and my awards accolade. But of course, the truth is, he knows me so well. He said, "We're running late, Cabinet Secretary," as you make your remarks. I'm enjoying the use of polls, both Slido, which I think will feature in the questions, and the live polls that have been conducted so far. And I was beginning to wonder, though, if the room, even though there are 700 delegates in attendance, was suffering from a bit of herd mentality, because nobody was disagreeing with any of the propositions until the last couple of questions. But on the way into Glasgow this morning, was anyone listening to Clyde FM? Well, that's good. In no way whatsoever for the point I'm about to make, or for Clyde FM for that matter, but the point I was going to make in listening to the radio, it started off with two other cities have beaten Glasgow in, and I thought, of all mornings, what is it going to be as Scotland's Economy Secretary addressing this conference? So apparently, Aberdeen and Edinburgh has beaten in a poll Glasgow for a good night out. Now, I don't use anecdote to make government decisions, but I disagree. So I want to do a poll here and now. Who thinks Glasgow gives you the best night out of any city in Scotland? Put your hand down. You win. Oh, I better count the other side. Who doesn't? Oh, well, that just shows it is herd mentality. Either you're all Glaswegians or you have just come to that conclusion. No, I'm delighted to be here. I think I've been to every State of the Economy conference in Glasgow since I've been Economy Secretary, indeed since this Glasgow administration was elected to office. I appreciate the invitation because I'm very passionate about Glasgow, not just for the city's sake, but for the country and the region's sake as well. Being a son, I think my contribution will follow on quite helpfully from what you've heard so far from the council leader and from the university champions, vice-chancellors and principals. I don't know what we call a kind of plurality of vice-chancellors, but there's no principals, was what Jim joked to me earlier and said, but don't say that publicly. That'll teach you. But I appreciate your advice, Anton, particularly the report that you produced in terms of how higher education can contribute to the economy, even more so around innovation, commercialisation than it is right now. And again, Jim, the work around just the economy, manufacturing, industrial base as well, and the partnership that we have around that is absolutely valuable. I hope to follow on from some of the comments the council leaders made as well. But this is a significant conference and very timely as well. And I say maybe some matters that you would expect me to address might come up later in the questions rather than right now. Because the focus of my address this morning is going to be about the Clyde. Not just the city, but the whole Clyde corridor, something that I've been very closely involved with throughout my time in elected office of over 20 years, starting off as a councillor in Renfrew. Now, the reason I think it's timely and important is in this national themed year of Scotland's coasts and waters, I do want to talk about the role of the River Clyde in shaping the future of the city, the region, and Scotland over the next 10 to 20 years, just as the history of the Clyde represents our past. And see, when the Clyde and its success and the city is bound together, it makes such a difference to Scotland. And the organisers and the civil service asked me to make some personal reflections to set out why it's so important to me, not just because it's economic growth and important to the government, but growing up in Renfrew as I did, I saw the deindustrialisation of my town, the dereliction that existed, the issues around connectivity, the ward I represented. You know, I could stand at a point where Braehead now sits and tell you it was dereliction, it was a former power station. The tram lines were there. It's funny how things work out, isn't it? The tram lines were there. I could see the connectivity of the ferry road, what used to be rail, and think what wonderful opportunity we have. And I remember in my youth doing a project in high school about the deindustrialisation of the town and how that could be turned around with looking to the future, including that connectivity. My personal connections go a bit further. My mother fell in the River Clyde as well. Civil service didn't expect me to tell you that. The Columba Club in Renfrew's got a lot to answer for, let me tell you. But I have a real affinity to the river. I can hear, I'm being heckled now by the council leader. Listen, when she came out the river, the oils in her hair were lovely, by the way. At last, the oil of you like nothing on that. Of course, she was fine. But so I've got a real affinity, not just because of the natural feature that is the river, but it is very much a spine of opportunity, because if you look at the opportunities of the corridor of the river, what's going on that corridor that we've heard much about today, it is absolutely so significant. And when Jim was talking about the bragging book, or call it what you will, the prospectus, the reasons to be positive despite the dark clouds and the difficulty, maybe we should be, as policymakers and as leaders, a bit more gallus about the city and what's going on, because when you look at it in its totality, it is transformational. And it's not just the public sector, it is the public sector and the private sector working together, and it's those opportunities that I want to seize. So proud of our past and very excited about our future, because the Clyde is still at the centre of our communities and our economy, right from South Lanarkshire down through to Inverclyde, and indeed Argyll and Bute. So let's look at some of the statistics. From that patch, from that corridor from South Lanarkshire through to Inverclyde, nearly 115,000 people live in the area just 500 metres from either side of the river, and 1 mile either side of the river corridor. There's a population of nearly 500,000. 1 million people. Now, within the 500 metres of the river corridor itself, running right through, there are over 30,000 companies supporting around 160,000 jobs and an estimated GVA of £6.5 billion supporting the Scottish economy. And there are more than 430,000 jobs within a mile of that river corridor. Now, we know there are challenges as well, and we have to address those constraints to be able to safeguard and grow in a sustainable way. So the area is not without its challenges. Steve Dunlop's here, Chief Executive of Scottish Enterprise. There's 250 sites of vacant and derelict land running across this area. That's 400 hectares of vacant and derelict land, which of course we would want to optimise. Now, of course, as I say, there are constraints that will only get worse because of climate change, including the risk of flooding, and that's why we now need a coordinated approach to address the constraints that would impede our sustainable growth agenda, and that's why we must continue to work together. But a further point that was expressed in terms of inequality by the Council leader was that there continues to be, even with this growth and this wealth and this prosperity, deep inequality in our country. Now, just looking at that corridor once again, within the 500 metres corridor on either side of the river, 1 in 4 of the population that live in those areas are within the 15% most deprived in Scotland. So when we're looking at the Clyde strategy, inclusive growth is so important. Of course, there are strategic assets in and around the Clyde, running from the Firth of Forth. It's one of the deepest sea entrance channels in Northern Europe, right into the heart of this city centre. And Clyde Port's George V Dock between Govan and Braehead covers nearly 33 hectares and has a quay of over 1,500 metres long, with 500 metres by the riverside. Greenock Ocean Terminal, owned by Clyde Port, is Scotland's deepest container terminal, with 3 ship-to-shore cranes which can lift 35 to 40 tonnes each. Of course, we've heard about the improved transport connectivity with Queen Street progressing well. I think that will be iconic into the future. Glasgow Airport, of course, carries over 9 million passengers and is a real dynamo to the economy here in the West. And we've heard about the fantastic work of our universities. And it's not just those universities, of course, Glasgow Caledonian as well, University of the West of Scotland, contributing to the economy and the success of the West of Scotland, and of course the colleges. And I look forward to the further education report, as well as the higher education report, and how we can contribute more to the economy and the crucial item of skills, so that we are training and skilling people up to what business and industry actually needs. And the other academic and vocational institutions that Jim and Anton had mentioned earlier as well. But key businesses that I've engaged with very, very recently in outlining their ambitious plans also for the Clyde area do include BAE, Thales, Peelport, Spire, Clyde Space, Bioclavis, Logitech, and of course Dials and Greenock, who had the support of the First Minister just this week in announcing a further package of support from Scottish Enterprise. So the last number of years has been significant by way of public and private investment, transforming the very physical nature of the banks of the Clyde, but beyond that into those other communities, transformations such as at Clyde Gateway with housing and other development. The sports arena has been so significant. Maybe less appealing or attractive, but absolutely crucial, includes some of the development in our infrastructure, such as the £100 million Shield Hall Tunnel, which is the biggest water tunnel in Scotland, bringing better water quality and, of course, reducing flooding for the city as well. And then other iconic features such as the SEC Hydro opening up and bringing economic benefits to the city as well. But looking to the future, the city-region deal that we've heard much about is leveraging in that pipeline of private sector investment as well as that public investment to make the difference. And only this week, in celebrating the foreign direct investment to Scotland, safeguarding jobs, delivering new jobs, I was again at the Barclays campus in Glasgow, an example of where the Team Scotland and the Team Glasgow approach worked to ensure that Barclays is investing more by way of capital in their campus, hundreds of millions of pounds, safeguarding jobs and growing and doubling the number of jobs at their site as well. Over £400 million, with potentially 5,000 people employed at their Glasgow campus, transforming that side of the river, a catalyst, I believe, for future development as well. There's future plans from the city about expanding the exhibition centre, I think warmly welcomed as well, in terms of the additionality that that will bring to the city also. And you've heard about the innovation districts at the universities. Innovation not just for academia in its own right, although that is worthy, but connecting it to business and industrial and commercial success as well, so we can grow the research and development base in Scotland, because that will give us the high quality, sustainable future that we all want to see. Because we want to do manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, low carbon manufacturing, but we want to be the architects, the designers, the creators as well, and that does mean investing in innovation in the fashion that's been suggested by our colleagues and partners. Actual investment into the waterfront, the innovation districts, and as you've heard, the multi-billion-pound proposals coming from our higher education sector in this city. Further work around the clinical innovation zone at the Queen Elizabeth University hospitals to be welcome. And you've heard much about the advanced manufacturing district and the National Manufacturing Institute for Scotland located in the region as well. Really exciting, not just because much of it's in my own constituency, I hasten to add, but I am excited by these opportunities as well as elsewhere, such as at Queen's Quay and Clydebank, which is a £250 million low-carbon mixed-use development which is taking shape at the site of the former John Brown shipyard. And it's low-carbon because of the large-scale water source heat pump, the first of its kind in Scotland, which will use energy from the Clyde to heat local housing, businesses and public buildings. Now, with capacity to extend that to low-cost energy to other parts of Clydebank as well. So as well as providing green low-cost energy to social housing tenants, this low-carbon energy gives a unique green dividend for commercial and residential development. And if it's possible in Clydebank, then imagine what we can do right along the length of the Clyde. And there's more. The Malin Group is developing exciting plans for the Scottish Marine Technology Park in Old Kilpatrick, creating a hub for marine engineering for research and development with deep water access to river and the potential to create 1,000 jobs. There's a £28 million redevelopment at the Exxon site in Bowling, which will support industrial and commercial development. And at Inverclyde, the council is working with Peel Ports to take forward a scheme in terms of deep water access and industrial hub at Inch Green, creating a new £20 million cruise berth and visitor centre at Greenock Ocean Terminal. So if you get the sense of good things are happening, you'll also know of my personal commitment to shipbuilding in the west of Scotland and on the Clyde. Now, given those assets in the pipeline of public and private investment, we should be upbeat about the area's future. However, my sense, and having engaged with many of you, is that our individual efforts of public and private investment could come together better. My sense is that those efforts and investments as partners may sometimes appear fragmented, and that working together we could optimise such investments to ensure that those assets or investments add up to more than the sum of their parts. So, in response, I want to pull together what's already happening in a much more coherent manner and working together more closely across the public and the private sectors to attract further investment and stimulate that sustainable growth and tackle the constraints. So together we have an opportunity to make much better use of the Clyde and the surrounding land and national strategic assets to help deliver that economic, social and environmental ambitions and help bring those benefits to local people and local communities. We can build on the established industries, create new ones as well, attract international talent and investment with our approach, bring vacant and derelict land back into use, working in partnership and using the necessary powers where required. We can open up the river again to visitors and communities. We should look very closely at the Connectivity Commission's work to enhance connectivity, and I'll come back to that. And we should ensure that the Clyde is climate ready, adaptable and resilient to that climate change, and of course, as I've touched on in Clydebank, in terms of a source of heat and energy, then there's further opportunities there for business and communities as well. So realising those opportunities could help tackle poverty and disadvantage, and safeguard and create new, meaningful, purposeful jobs, a core mission of mine. So, in that regard, today I'm announcing a national place-based mission to make the Clyde an engine of sustainable and inclusive growth for the city, the region and for the country. That mission will be focused on the unique opportunities and competitive advantage of the river and immediate surrounding land, and in taking account of the risks such as flooding, which have the potential to limit those opportunities and hold us back. My focus will be on the assets and opportunities rather than lines on a map. This will be a strategic, long-term and collective endeavour which will require a systematic and holistic approach, as well as imagination, commitment, and new ways of working across the public and the private sectors, with strong engagement with businesses and communities. I know from our engagement with council leaders, public bodies and private sector players that they share this ambition. You've heard much of it this morning already and are keen to collaborate and play our part. So to lead and support that, I will establish a new team in government to drive and coordinate policy and activity and actions across government and our agencies around this Clyde mission. The team with Scottish Enterprise will also work with agencies such as SEPA, who I know are committed to this agenda. So initial work will focus on developing a compelling investor prospectus of exciting projects and those existing projects as well into the future to produce a pipeline, identifying further opportunities for creating business growth and jobs along the Clyde and working with the private sector to realise those opportunities, and realising the potential of the river to help address the climate change emergency, turning it into opportunities that it can present for jobs in industry, and looking at how we can bring forward investment propositions through the Green Growth Accelerator model and the Scottish National Investment Bank that I'm building right now as to how we can lever in further private investment to achieve our aims. And coming back to connectivity, Councillor Aitken is correct. The announcement that both Glasgow and Renfrewshire councils intend to focus City Deal funding on a link to the airport as the first phase of a Glasgow metro system is a positive step, which, as we've stated in the programme for government, we will consider as part of the Strategic Transport Projects Review. Transport Scotland will also provide advice and expertise to the councils as they explore and develop it. However, again, as a member, a local member with a strong constituency interest, I'm already genuinely impressed with the early consensus that has been achieved around this emerging new proposal. And I'm building on existing flood management strategies and developing plans with work around the Metropolitan Glasgow Strategic Drainage Partnership. We'll work with the Council, SEPA, Scottish Water and other local authorities to address the ways that we can most effectively manage the future flood risk in the City and Clyde corridor. And that's a collective approach to jointly tackle the issues that we face. Now, in announcing the Clyde mission, it will help steer other government policy and announcements, such as the Economic Action Plan, that I will refresh, update and announce shortly, and other considerations as well. So we'll use the opportunities that are presented as we take forward the preparation of the National Planning Framework to consider the strategic importance of the Clyde in the fashion that I've described, as well as taking forward other actions along the lines of the Team Scotland approach that I've described. Other speakers have already spoken of the opportunity of the climate conference, COP26, and that will be our opportunity to put Glasgow on the map as doing the right thing by the environment, but also turning climate change and the climate emergency into climate opportunity for us as well. So in conclusion, the city and the region has seen its greatest prosperity when it made use of the river as a strategic asset and as a source of competitive advantage. And as I said at the start, when the Clyde flourishes, so does the city and so does Scotland. And I hope you share my view, that there are fantastic opportunities to not only put the Clyde back at the centre of our economic and community policy, but also at the heart of our plans around the environment as well. Those great opportunities to work together to create the new future for the land, the businesses and the communities right along the Clyde are very worthy, great opportunities. So let us work together to seize those opportunities and take forward the new Clyde mission. Thank you very much.
Cabinet Secretary, thank you very much indeed. Again, so many things in your speech, but the announcement today of a new national mission for the Clyde, an integrated, coordinated approach, sustainability, productivity, innovation, inclusion, the underlining of your personal enthusiasm and the government's enthusiasm for the metro, beginning with the airport link, and then your recognition of COP26 as a catalyst for opportunity. One that will enable us to develop the economy in a low-carbon way, as well as to take a leadership platform to the world. Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a quick stand up and just take a 30-second breather. Don't leave the room. And while you do that, can I have the first panel please come and join me on the stage? Just stretch the legs. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats again. I'm going to ask you to take out your smartphones once more. Go back into the Wi-Fi network, access Slido again, hashtag SOCE 2020, and you'll see a very interesting poll concerning Scottish inventions. Please go back into your Slido app. Thank you very much. We're going to continue now, so please take your seats again. Back into the Slido app. We're going to shortly introduce our panel on innovation and creativity. There's a question for you there on Scottish inventions. Which of the following things were not invented in Scotland or by a Scot? Was it Australian rules football? Was it the Bank of England? What about the Bank of France? What about Forbes magazine? What about rugby? Which of these was not invented by a Scot? Can we see the votes, please, on the screen as they're moving along? 94 people have voted so far. The winner at the moment for not invented by a Scot is rugby. The clear loser is the Bank of England, but you can't really see that very well on this screen. But keep voting. 169 have voted. We'd like to know more. While you're voting, let me tell you who our very distinguished panel are. Firstly, sitting immediately on my right, we have Adrian Gillespie, Chief Commercial Officer of the University of Strathclyde. Sitting next to him, we have Evelyn MacDonald, Chief Executive Officer of Scottish Edge. Evelyn will tell you all about that in a minute. And sitting next to her, Joe Street, who's the head of daytime at Channel 4. Please give our panel a big, warm Glasgow welcome. Now, you've all very kindly voted in this poll, and I have to say it's a very erudite audience because you're right. Rugby indeed was the only thing in the list not invented by a Scot. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to keep Slido open at the moment. There's a very wide range of questions that many of you already submitted when you registered for the conference. You also have the opportunity to add new questions now. This panel is going to focus on creativity and innovation. The next panel will focus on sustainability and circularity. And then our final panel will be to have the Cabinet Secretary and the leader of the city back on the stage, where we'll be talking about the broad leadership agenda, advocacy, politics, many other things. So please prioritise now questions to do with creativity and innovation. We'll look at those in a minute, but firstly let's turn to our panel. Adrian, please say a word or two about yourself and your role, and in a sense, why are you here?
Thanks very much, Greg. Principally I'm here today as one of the sponsors of today's event, the Glasgow City Innovation District, which is a partnership between the University of Strathclyde, where I'm the Chief Commercial Officer, and our partners, Glasgow City Council, Scottish Enterprise, Glasgow Chamber of Commerce and Entrepreneurial Scotland. And we're driving forward the development of the Glasgow City Innovation District. I'm also involved as Executive Lead for the University in developing the Advanced Manufacturing Innovation District at Renfrew, part of which is the National Manufacturing Institute and the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre.
Great, so 2 of these innovation districts are under your purview. Evelyn, please tell us a little bit about yourself and why are you here?
Okay, I'm Evelyn MacDonald from Scottish Edge. Scottish Edge is a business competition. We run the competition twice a year, aiming to identify and support Scotland's early stage, innovative, up-and-coming, high-growth potential entrepreneurial talent. Scotland is actually the city where we've had the most winners. We support around 60 businesses a year. We invest £1 million in each round, and what we're hoping to do is have an impact on the economy by encouraging innovative businesses who can sell their products and services out with Scotland and will also create high value jobs. And I'm also separately involved on the board of the Scottish Design Exchange, and we have a shop in Glasgow as well which supports artists and craftspeople. So I'm here hopefully to answer questions on the importance of innovation and also creativity in Glasgow.
Great, thank you very much. And did you say that Glasgow has the most innovative businesses in Scotland?
Well, yes, I suppose you could put that spin in it. In terms of the competition, yeah, the highest percentage of Scottish Edge winners have come from, are living and working in Glasgow.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Joe, welcome to you. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're here.
I am Jo Street, so I'm head of daytime for Channel 4. I am also head of the new Channel 4 hub, which is in Merchant City, and I am an adopted child of Glasgow. This is my 12th year here, and I guess I'm here to bring the showbiz sparkle. I should manage everyone's expectations on that, but I have been, I was 25 years in the BBC. I'm only kind of 3 and a bit months into Channel 4. I have a love and a passion for daytime telly, and that's what I'm here to talk about.
Great, thank you very much. Is it possible for you to summarise in a nutshell why Channel 4 chose Glasgow?
I think it was a no-brainer. I think it's an amazing city and it was recognised for that. Its production base is already mature. It's got incredible connections, I think, with the universities already. It had a track record and it's sort of got that Channel 4 sass. I think Glasgow as a city is an embodiment of it. Certainly that's what everything coming together for me, leaving one big public service broadcaster going to another, it felt like a perfect time to make that leap at a time when things are exciting for Glasgow as a city and exciting for Channel 4.
Great, thank you. And Evelyn, if there was a reason why Glasgow-based businesses are so competitive in the kind of Scottish Edge challenge that you're involved with, why do you think it is? What is it about Glasgow that produces so many competitive entries?
I think actually I would have to point to the 2 universities. In particular, actually, the University of Strathclyde, who work tirelessly with entrepreneurs and encouraging businesses to consider business ideas. And also, I think the growing of certain sectors within Glasgow. So we're seeing people, that have been working in the space industry, for example, and coming up with ideas and coming to us. So I think that's probably the main reason, but the universities I would point to is the key reason.
Thank you. And Adrian, 5 years ago, Scotland didn't have any innovation districts that had been announced, and now Glasgow's got 3. So why is that?
Well, innovation districts don't start overnight. I think these have grown up. It was mentioned earlier, the Technology and Innovation Centre was essentially kind of the embodiment of Strathclyde's approach to industrial engagement, which is collaborative internally across our faculties and departments, but very externally collaborative, and creating that environment where companies can work together, where they can engage with researchers who are motivated and keen to engage around industrial challenges. Was the kind of kernel of what then became the TIC Zone, and that then attracted lots and lots of innovation centres, Catapult, Scottish Funded Council funded innovation centres, businesses, and actually it's become a very straightforward proposition to sell. Once companies see the value of that, they decide very quickly that that's the kind of location that they want to be. So scaling that up, both within the Glasgow City Innovation District, but also expanding it to how we develop the Advanced Manufacturing Institute and the environment around that, and what Anton talked about around Govan. We've got a model now that we know works, but we need to just make much, much more of it. And also apply that model of engagement around industrial engagement more to our social engagement, and how we make sure that as an innovation district that the people that live and work in those districts get the benefit, participate in, contribute to the development of the districts.
Great, thank you very much. Can we look at now the top questions, Kevin, that have been supplied by our delegates? Are they on the screen coming up? Are we going to see them up here? We are. Okay, so question one, quite a few votes on this. How can innovation and creativity create meaningful opportunities for citizens? We might ask you to answer that, Adrian. Tackling the digital skills gap. Joe, could you pick that up? Is that a question that's in your bailiwick? Yeah? Glasgow's best kept secret that we should tell the rest of the world. Evelyn, would you like to start with that, and then we'll do a few more? So we're going to try and do as many questions as we can now in the next 12 minutes. So over to you, Adrian.
Okay, so looking at it through the sort of lens of an innovation district, then we know Strathclyde in Glasgow is the anchor for that. In terms of how citizens can contribute, I mean, this spans a lot of areas. Clearly, innovation districts create a lot of jobs. They create jobs with a very international focus that generates more people wanting to come and live and work in the city. But for young people, the opportunity to then participate in a university, for a university to have a kind of culture where its doors are open, not just metaphorically, but physically. You have buildings where people are invited in to participate in, let's say, the development of new healthcare technologies, the development of new financial technologies, fintech models that allow greater participation in, for example, one of the companies in Tontine, Nude, a startup company, is helping people to save for their first-time purchases. So these companies can create employment. They get the benefit of education. Strathclyde has a very strong track record in widening access in terms of the 20% of most challenging postcodes. 20% of Strathclyde students come from those postcodes, and still maintaining very, very high entry qualifications. We are fifth in the UK in terms of entry qualifications. So educational, economical, social, there are a number of ways in which innovation through providing the environment where innovation is encouraged, supported, can benefit people in many ways.
Great, thank you very much. And you've very cleverly answered the next question as well, which is, what is the point of innovation districts? But we'll ask you for a bit more about that in a minute. Joe, this next question is about the digital skills gap. In your experience, is there a digital skills gap? Is it easy when a Channel 4 comes to Glasgow to find the talent that it needs? Does it have to invest a lot in training, or is the skills supply readily available?
I'm going to answer this as a slight linear dinosaur in terms of, I think people of my generation have grown up with telly that we watch on a TV. We think there is a skills gap, and there is. What I think Channel 4, being in Glasgow in particular, in my office we have a digital commissioner who is commissioning content that lives on social, online, and it's about forming relationships, I think. It is about us connecting with universities, with young people, but having platforms for content to live on. It's also about us investing in companies who want to be in that space as well, identifying them. I think it's important we prioritise that. Like shows don't just live in one place anymore. They live on our social media feeds. And it's a challenge, but it in Leeds, part of Channel 4's whole, for all the UK strategy, there's a digital content unit set up. There's going to be an academy. We will work more broadly across the UK. In Glasgow, in our office, there's a real focus for people to come to us and for us to connect and grow that community, I think.
And just a sort of a secondary question from me, when Susan was speaking earlier, she talked about the Golden Globe Awards, the productions that had been undertaken in Glasgow that were winning awards. Does this surprise you? Do you expect to see Glasgow being the stage, the platform, the domain for a lot of creative production in the future?
I absolutely do. I think this whole bragging book idea is really crucial. I don't think we bang our own drum about the shows that are made up here already. You know, let's talk about areas at the airport. I made Robot Wars in a warehouse next to the runway at Glasgow Airport. We make location in Scotland, Homes Under the Hammer. You're very welcome to that show. But you know, you look at Saturday Night Telly at the moment. The company that make The Masked Singer have an office in Kinning Park. You know, they're making content. It's a competitor broadcaster for me now, but I commissioned them when I was at BBC to make formats. Those formats are selling in Italy. It's a global economy, and having companies here who are part of that global industry is it's so exciting. It's such an opportunity, and for the ripple effect outside, not just the bums on seats, entry-level jobs, creative, immediate industry, but also the composers, the graphics, all of that kind of broader creative world that we tap into is profound.
And to your mind, any obvious constraints here in Glasgow, or is, you know, the sky's the limit?
The sky is the limit. You know, people are, oh, you can't make celebrity shows in Scotland, celebs won't travel. Yes, they will. You know, if people have a good time, and this is a city you can have a good time in, they will come. You know, there are loads of shows. I think there are constraints only when companies self-edit, and when you don't put limits on them. And part of my job is to go, I want to commission shows that just live on Channel 4. I care that they're made out of Glasgow. The audience doesn't. You know, it's just an opportunity for companies to get their IP made, to find formats, to sell them internationally, to bring money into our city, but to take our creativity everywhere.
So we'll get the Cabinet Secretary to talk to more of these celebs about what a good time you can have in Glasgow. Evelyn, will you pick up this question then of what do you think is Glasgow's best kept secret that we should tell the rest of the world?
I think Susan actually came up with it earlier. One of my favourites is the fact that we build more satellites in Glasgow than any place outside of Silicon Valley. I also think that one of our secrets is just the amount of innovation that's going on here, the different things that we see on a daily basis, the recent spin out from Strathclyde that's come up with a new blood test to detect brain tumours significantly earlier. The fact that one of the best selling travel pillows in the world, is based in Glasgow. We've got a young man who struggled with dyslexia, has invented a new piece of software to support dyslexics to make presentations as students and throughout their lives. Just different, the sheer scale of amazing ideas that we see in the city all the time, and actually across Scotland, I think is something we need to brag more about.
Yes, and have you got a view about how we should do that? Is it you saying it more? Is it the Cabinet Secretary and the Leader of the Council? Who needs to do the talking?
I think we all do. I think we all do. I
Right,
think we
lots
should
of-
all be talking up. Let's face it, it's a big issue in Scotland is that we don't tend to be as confident as we should be. We tend to be very self-critical. So I think we all need to, back to this bragging book, we should all have a bragging book about what we're trying to do here, what our aims are and what we're currently achieving.
You're sort of unintentionally answering this question, so I'm going to keep you with it for a minute, which is, what do you think we can do to get the private sector more involved in being part of this movement to think and act for Glasgow?
And I think we do that. I mean, I think, Scottish Edge is a private-public sector partnership. Obviously, the innovation districts. I think that we are constantly looking at, we don't want to. I think in general we are not focusing just on investing public pounds. We're looking always to bring collaborations in from the private sector to try and drive projects forward, and I see that across the board. I think Adrian would have more to say on that.
Great, okay. Well, Adrian might come to that in a minute. Adrian, I want you to pick up this question here, which says, given the stubborn and persistent levels of poverty in the Glasgow area, what role should enterprise, innovation, economy play to finally solve this problem? Can we finally solve this problem, and how do we use enterprise, innovation and the economy to do it?
Okay, I touched on this probably earlier when I talked about opening our doors to businesses and the communities in which we operate and providing an environment that people want to engage in. There are many examples of, from an educational point of view, for example, the Children's University that encourages people who might not consider themselves having a university or further education as part of their development to come in and experience a university and to then take that forward. But then once they're there, to actually see that this is not just about an academic education, it's about the opportunity to engage with companies, to expand and start careers. And then, as that grows, to then sort of feed that experience and the learning from that back into the communities. So for me, you mentioned what's the point of innovation districts? Innovation districts provide a focal point. They provide a focal point for partnership between the public and private sector. I mentioned the partnership we have in place with the Council of Scottish Enterprise, the chambers around developing the innovation district. They provide a focal point for investment. But they provide a community, a focal point for developing a community that reaches out beyond the businesses and the researchers into the community round about them and strives to make the impact of what they're doing felt there and strives to ensure that the community participates in the development of and the innovation that happens there.
Great, thank you very much. We're going to try and take a couple more questions each. Joe, there's two questions here I wanted you to look at. The first one says, the creative industry is often undervalued, but it takes creative thinking to address complicated world issues. We've been talking about some of those today. How do you think we can help showcase this? So is there a role for creative industries in tackling these big issues, sustainability, inclusion, climate change? And then there's another question here about schools. Should schools do a bit more to encourage creativity and innovation? Could you pick those two up?
Yeah, I think it's crucial that the creative industry gets involved in these big issues. Something we're talking about at Channel 4 at the moment is climate. And then you go, there's a massive opportunity with COP26. But it's hard. I think one of our priorities is about trying to open up Channel 4 to different voices. Part of this move, the importance of being in Glasgow, is to hear different perspectives and what matters to different areas of the UK. I think we're all, inured sometimes to a London-centric view of the world, and so being not there and taking ideas from a catchment such as Glasgow will help us do this. I think we have to be braver in what we think our audience wants to watch. I think it's easy to default to entertainment because that gets the big audiences. Sometimes we have to take difficult decisions about smaller audiences but making bigger important points. I think in terms of schools, when I was growing up, I grew up in Yorkshire, and to get into telly I had to go to Birmingham actually at the time, and being in a city is a tangible thing, and I think the more that young people know broadcasters are in a city and that they can access it. I'm incredibly passionate about social inclusion and diversity and how we attract different voices into the industry, and we have to work harder. I think what I see in Glasgow is incredible because social diversity is much greater in the companies that I'm working with than it is elsewhere in the UK. And I think that's another thing we need to be really proud of and bang that drum louder. But I think diversity in all its forms is crucial. I think schools should be promoting creative industries as a really positive career choice. Apprenticeships, I think, are key as well. We're with academic colleagues on the platform. University is one way in, but also there are other routes into creative industries. I don't think we should forget about those either.
Great, thank you very much. So let's strike these two questions off, and I think although this question is a permanent agenda item, I think we've had a bit of a go at it. The next question is about students staying on in the city after graduation, and I do want Adrian to comment on this, but Evelyn, I thought we'd start with you and just say, of all these companies that you see in Scottish Edge, how many of them have been started by graduates or undergraduates at Scottish universities, and is there, in your view, a translation from being a student in Scotland to being an entrepreneur in Scotland?
Yes, we do see that a lot actually, and obviously there is the opportunity to get visas to continue to pursue your business in Scotland. And recently actually we applied for and were accepted that we can offer startup and innovator visas for businesses. It's predominantly students that have started a business in Scotland and have decided they want to continue, and it's the next step visa to enable them to continue to work on their business and start to take on members of staff and start to raise funding and then prove that they're going to be based here. So we are increasingly seeing that, that people come to Scotland, come up with ideas here, are encouraged and supported, and then see the opportunity to stay here. So there are changes being made, but again, obviously it's still UK based rather than Scotland based, the decisions around this.
Sure. Adrian, a comment about that from you? University students staying in the city after graduation. Anything else that needs to be done? And then I'm going to ask you all just a last question on what you're looking forward to this year.
Okay. So data on this is quite old, but around half of university graduates will stay in the immediate vicinity. But I guess you have to remember that, at that age, a lot of people, they actually can want to go and experience somewhere else. That may be for a year, it may be for 6 months, it may be for longer. It's healthy to have a proportion of our students who are going out and taking up careers in other parts of the world and connecting us into those parts of the world. But it's a very, very hard thing to track. But essentially what I say is, if you create the opportunities here, if you create the environment here, then people will stay. People want to stay in the city. On entrepreneurship, I would say, in terms of the entrepreneurs that come through Strathclyde, a very high proportion of those entrepreneurs, a disproportionate amount of those entrepreneurs, are students who've come to Scotland for their education. I think there's something in that about attracting more of those students, but I think there's also something that we need to consider about why there isn't a higher proportion of our home-based graduates and students that are choosing entrepreneurship as a career path.
Great, thank you very much. Very quickly, what are you looking forward to this year? Jo?
Getting fully settled in and really starting to build relationships that have a Channel 4 complexion, and supporting the production companies that are here already, those that start to spring up and get their ideas on the TV.
Brilliant. Evelyn?
Okay, it's supporting more innovative Scottish entrepreneurs to turn their businesses into a reality, and also to see the progress of some of the businesses that we've worked with. I'm particularly excited about a business that we actually invested in 2016, and they've developed a new power wheelchair, and it's been a really long journey for them, a lot of challenges, and they will finally start selling that product in spring this year, and that will be fantastic to see, and to have been part of that journey will be amazing.
Adrian?
A few things actually. First of all, the National Manufacturing Institute and the Medicines Manufacturing Innovation Centre are going to start coming out of the ground in the middle of this year. So that's a hugely important milestone with them both opening next year. So lots of work going on there, but not just around the building itself. Actually, a lot of the projects are underway already, so that's going to grow really, really quickly. And in terms of the City Innovation District, We're making the case now to double the size of the TIC zone, which is the hub of the Innovation District. So we'll be putting that case forward next year for funders. So a positive outcome to that would be a great development.
Great. Joe Street from Channel 4, Evelyn MacDonald from Scottish Edge, Adrian Gillespie from the University of Strathclyde, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Also, thank you very much to all of you for being patient with our slight time lag. We're actually catching up quite well now, mainly due to the Cabinet Secretary's steely use of time, for which we're very appreciative. Let's get our next panel on stage. It's about sustainability and the circular economy. We're looking forward to so many things to do with COP26 and the zero carbon agenda this year. And we have a poll for you as well on Slido. Please go into Slido, go to the poll. Can I have the panelists on stage, please? Come and join me and I'll introduce you in a moment or two whilst we're doing the poll. What do you think will have the main responsibility for tackling, or who has the main responsibility for tackling climate change? In the poll, you're being asked to make 2 votes, which means you can allocate your 2 votes across the options of national government, local government, environmental organisations, business and industry, or international organisations. Let's have the slides on the screen so we can see how people are voting. And while you're voting, let me introduce our fantastic panel. So firstly, we have sitting here close to me at this end, Andrew Parsons, Global City Growth Director at Jacobs. Next to him, Lindsay McQuaid, Chief Executive Officer of Scottish Power Renewables. Next to her, Dr. Warren Bowden, Managing Director for Operations at SLG Technology Limited. And next to him, Ian Bruce, Chief Executive of the Glasgow Council for the Voluntary Sector. Please welcome this panel. So the Slido's pushing away here. We'd like to get, I think, 250 responses before we look at that. So keep voting while our panelists introduce themselves. We're going to go down the line. I'm going to ask each panelist to tell us who they are and indeed why they're here. So Andrew, would you like to start?
Thank you. So Andrew Parsons from Jacobs. We're a sponsor of this event. I've been in the city for 30 years. I was educated here and I've since lived and worked here for a long time. I'm very passionate about the city. I think we have some great challenges ahead of us, but also some great opportunities. And as a business, we're here to really work with our partners, our friends in SMEs and other companies from the private sector.
Great, thank you very much. Lindsay?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lindsay McQuaid. I'm Scottish Power Renewables Chief Executive. Born and bred in Glasgow, and experienced at University of Strathclyde for my education, and have had a great career living and working in Glasgow and really enjoyed that. Often travelled to London and, oh, you must live in London. No, I don't. I live in Glasgow. And it's nice to fly the flag when you're out and about. I guess part of the reason I'm here is that nowadays everyone gives a damn where their electricity comes from. The relationship that we all have with electricity is changing massively. 10, 15 years ago when you would have been thinking about your car or how you would heat your home, electricity probably wasn't front of mind, but nowadays it's something that we're all talking about a lot more. So the way we use our energy, the relationship that we have with where our energy comes from matters an awful lot more, and that's really why I'm here.
Great, thank you and welcome. Warren.
Good afternoon. Great. I was expecting to say good morning. I'm not from here, as you can probably tell from my accent. I've been here 20 years. I'm an interloper, although I'm delighted to be a freeman of the city. I'm here representing Circular Glasgow. That's one of my 2 hats. I'm delighted to do that because I think some of the speakers this morning have presented the low carbon argument, but the low carbon argument is only part of sustainability. There's something called the circularity gap. We need to address the issue of resources and the finite nature of those resources, being able to recover and reuse those. The second reason I'm here is also unashamedly to promote our own material, our own product. We're the producer of the lowest carbon leather on the planet, and I'd love to tell you more about that as we go through.
Actually, tell us more about the lowest carbon leather on the planet right now, just so that we know.
I didn't know how long I was going to get here, so I thought I'd be polite. We take a byproduct of what is claimed by Scottish agriculture as being climate neutral or net zero. We take that byproduct. We actually take about 90% of the Scottish herd. And we convert it through our own circular manufacturing process into what we call the lowest carbon leather product, lowest carbon leather. It created something of an industrial epiphany when we did it. In fact, the rest of the world leather industry is still catching up with us, an awful lot of negativity around this industrial sector. But I think we're one of the highlights that can actually put a positive story to this. And even at the end of its life, we can take that leather back. And part of that circularity argument is make a product that can last a long time. During its lifetime, repair, reuse, remanufacture it, upcycle it. But at the end of its life, if you can't do anything else with it, then you can take it back and recover it. And that's what I'm going to deliberately do this, from that game you did as a kid. If you can keep those two circles running, you can keep that resource circulating. And it's that circularity gap that really excites us.
So will people in the room be using the leather that you have created in this circular way?
I don't know. Well, I'm rather hoping this was
This furniture, yeah.
But I'm not sure it is. I'm sure that pretty much everyone in the room is wearing leather. Can we do that?
Yeah, we
Can
can.
we do a straw poll?
We could find out how many people in the room are wearing leather. Is that the question?
That is.
Yes? Okay, some kind of leather, belt, watch strap, shoes.
It's pretty much a
We won't ask you about underwear, don't worry. It's okay.
I could interject. I once did this in Mexico and I got to 12 items of leather and the lady at the back had to stand up. I couldn't ask her what the other 12, what the other two were.
Yeah.
I could only work out 10 of them. It's fabulous.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ian, welcome to you.
Well, thank you. My name is Ian Bruce. I'm the Chief Executive of Glasgow Council for the Voluntary Sector. Have been for about 5 months now, so I will claim newness if there's any difficult questions. Lived in Glasgow for about 21 years, minus a wee 6-month excursion east when I decided very quickly that I didn't want to live outside of Glasgow and rushed back. I'm here from the third sector's perspective. There's about 3,000, as Susan referred to earlier, there's about 3,000 voluntary organisations across the city. We employ about 27,000 people in the city, relatively small compared to private and public sectors perhaps, but intensively working with people that are most disadvantaged in society. And I suppose from our perspective, in terms of a future economy, an economy that's sustainable, an economy can't be sustainable if it doesn't work for everybody. History tells us that every time you have an economy that creates the inequality levels that we currently have, it falls over. So we need to do something now to fix that, and that's very much what we're about.
So social sustainability right at the heart of this. Great, thank you very much. Now, thank you for your votes, ladies and gentlemen. National government coming out at 73% in terms of organisations that need to take the lead or have the main responsibility, and individuals coming in second. So personal behaviour and choices made by people, but business and industry very close behind. So it seems in this room, national government, individuals, business and industry have the responsibility here. Let's get some of the questions that have been asked on the sustainability and circularity themes up on the table. What opportunities does the climate conference present to the city as you see it? I think, Lindsay, I'm going to ask you to pick up that one if we may. Why on earth haven't we got electric buses and taxis yet? Very, very good question. I don't know whether you feel, Andrew, you can tackle that a little bit. Is that a question you can pick up? Role of the third sector, Ian, that seems to be right in your sweet spot. And then there's a question down here that we can't see yet, Warren, which I'm going to put to you, which is about sustainable economy benefit and circularisation. So can we start then, Lindsay, with you? What do you see as being the big opportunities of the COP26 conference?
I think it's an opportunity for us to enhance the awareness that's really taken place over the last couple of years. It's an opportunity for us to tell the world about Scotland's position when it comes to tackling climate change, our resource capability, our skills capability, and the innovation that's gone on here to make sure that we are harnessing those natural resources that we have and using them as effectively as possible. I refer to Whiteley as Glasgow's adopted wind farm. Pretty much from wherever you are in the city you can see it, and I've got the privilege of that being part of my fleet. I'm delighted that Whiteley is now going to have one...
We've just lost your sound for a moment. I'm looking at the sound team at the back of the room. Keep speaking. Back. Yeah.
Okay. And with Whiteley having just celebrated its 10th birthday, which is staggering in itself, I remember when it was commissioned, it's great to see that we're now looking to extend and develop that site by putting a super battery on it so that we can ensure that renewable energy is the energy that we use. It won't matter that it's renewable or not, it's just going to be the energy that we all use.
Because the wind doesn't always blow, the rain doesn't always fall, albeit that we live in Scotland. The sun doesn't certainly always shine, but having the resource capability we have, coupled with storage, should mean that we've got a great story to tell and position ourselves in COP. I guess selfishly from Scottish Power's perspective, we've gone through a huge transition, and COP presents another opportunity for us to share that story, share that transition.
Yes, we're losing you, I'm afraid. We might need to give a handheld mic to Lindsay, but mic's on its way. And it'll be here straight away. Sorry about that. Very important issue, and you've made the point already about energy supply, but you're also talking now about a demonstrator.
Yeah, so...
Hold it close.
Still don't think it's on yet.
Is it on,
I'm being
Angus?
silenced, I feel.
Try now.
Now? No.
Now?
No? Right, okay.
Yes, okay.
There's nodding heads in the audience, excellent. Right, so COP is something that probably until we knew it was coming to Glasgow, a lot of us didn't even know what the acronym stood for. I was speaking to someone early this morning and I said, do you know about COP26? She looked at me blankly. And I said, you've heard of the Kyoto Protocol, you've heard of the Paris Agreement, that's the sort of thing we're talking about. And the look in her face was, wow, Glasgow's doing that. It's huge, it's such an opportunity for us to position the strides that we've taken, the efforts that have been made, the investment and jobs that have been created through the transition of the energy sector, and to tell that story. And also to point to the fact that we're not stopping, there's more to do. The connection of our homes to the energy network, the understanding of how we use our energy, the rollout of smart metering, which although has been painful and difficult, will enable us to have that different and more dynamic relationship with how we use electricity and can do so more sustainably. How we will generate our own electricity if we've got solar panels, for example. How we'll store electricity, whether that's in the battery in your car, the battery in your wall, or up at Whiteley. There's going to be quite a transition in how we do that. So I think COP26 is a marvellous opportunity for certainly Scottish Power to explain that position and talk and help everyone get on board with what that vision is going to be, understand what their role is, and hopefully influence the policy makers and decision makers about how we can get there even faster than has been talked about.
Great, thank you very much, Lindsay. Andrew, electric vehicles, why haven't we got them yet?
So I can't comment directly on electric vehicles in terms of buses in Glasgow. I'm pleased to read this morning that we have got an electric bus route which has come to the city, which is a fantastic starting point. And I think electric vehicles are part of the mix, and technology is advancing, and we're certainly seeing more electric taxis in the streets in Glasgow. I travelled one the other day. They're incredibly silent vehicles. There's a whole range of other things coming. There's some great innovations from our universities in the city around about different forms of energy to fuel vehicles, electrolytes, really, really exciting research that's going on in this city. But it only forms part of the mix. We've got the great announcement about the positivity around about the metro from both the Leader Council and the Scottish Government. So it's all about that mix of transport and the mix of choices we have, and particularly around that battery power will form part of the mix, I'm sure, going forward.
Great, thank you very much indeed. Ian, let's go to this question about the third sector, particularly supporting disadvantaged citizens, and the person who's asked the question saying particularly the damage caused by Brexit, which is being engineered by the Prime Minister, according to this question. So what do you think is the role of the third sector here?
I think obviously the third sector, I said before, has a huge role to play in supporting the most disadvantaged communities. It won't surprise people to recognise that Brexit is likely to hit the most disadvantaged communities hardest. Research from the Scottish Government suggests that in Glasgow 30% of our communities will be amongst those hit hardest by Brexit. That's quite a scary statistic. Some of these communities are communities that haven't recovered from 2008. They're communities that haven't recovered from the 70s. You know, we're talking about already sustained challenges in some of those communities and really stubborn challenges around poverty. And this is, you know, there's a sense for me, when I'm being negative, that this is another hammer blow to that recovery process. And from a third sector perspective, you know, we're very well placed. to support people to respond to those challenges, to help people to think about employment, to help people think about how we create stronger locally led communities, and also to help think about how those who are particularly disadvantaged in terms of being able to access transport, food, medicine, how can we help them to do that? It does require resource, and you'll understand we're already having that conversation with local and national government.
I'm sure you are, and I'm sure you're justified in doing so. Warren, there's two questions for you here. One is a broad question about how, progress towards a greener and more sustainable economy, benefiting not only the city, but also people from across the socio-economic spectrum. How do we make sustainability work for people at all income levels? And then there's a particular question about how we can use COP26 to promote circularity in Glasgow.
Okay, no pressure with either of those questions. I'm going to start this with if you're like a slightly flippant answer. There's a little bit of humour encouraged by the Finance Secretary earlier on. I'm passionate about circularisation and circular manufacturing and that sort of wider spectrum of sustainable manufacturing. To me, however, I think there's a need to understand where the spectrum is today and where we are today. I put the analogy of sustainability and circular manufacturing as a bit like analogous to teenage sex. Right? They're all talking about it. One or two of them are doing it, and the ones that are doing it really badly. So I think there's an opportunity here, and I think to answer some of that question, if you keep that in mind, I'm sure that you'll remember that. I think there is an opportunity here. Just looking at waste policy space, and there's a policy vacuum today, locally, nationally, and further away. Circularity is about converting what someone else doesn't want into something else that you can make a product from. Okay, so there's opportunities, industrial symbiosis. Why don't we do that? That covers a whole spectrum of materials. There's policy argument between across the borders and even further afield. If you're recycling material in this country, where does it actually go to? Just think about that. I can't answer that. But there are opportunities here because it doesn't get done here. It gets recycled somewhere much further away. There are opportunities locally to recycle, to recover, to reuse, to remanufacture. And going back to one of the previous questions in the previous panel, the opportunity for the creative industries. All of those materials that go into, let's say, a car or a sofa or into interiors of a house, they need to be purposed or designed such that they can be disassembled, remanufactured, or recovered and reused for other purposes, or indeed to be able to extend the life of those materials. There's opportunities across every part of the supply chain.
Great. And do you see COP26 as a particular opportunity to showcase circularity in Glasgow?
I do, and I think to answer some of the questions or some of the case that was made earlier, there's been an awful lot of emphasis in COP21 on carbon, on renewable energies, and they're absolutely vital. But we can't forget that vital part of in trying to achieve those objectives, which is the circularity gap. We need to be able to recover those resources, and that is an opportunity at COP26 to make that case, to encourage circularity within production.
Great, thank you very much. Now we're going to try and squeeze in another question for each person. Andrew, there's a question here that says, new development that isn't net zero will increase the climate change challenge. How do we balance this trade-off, apparently? Should we be having any new development that isn't zero carbon? How should we approach that?
I think we need to approach it on the basis that we can achieve certain levels of carbon neutrality on certain developments. We need to look at the balance that's left over. I think we also need to stop earlier in the process and perhaps reframe the problem and identify what we can do before we seek the solution. It's all too easy to go into solution mode and identify something which isn't actually going to achieve it. We need to create the policy that allows things to be collaboration easier. So if we're working in a development and we've got developments in the local area, we can adopt the principle of circularity much easier, where we have options for industry to share energy, to share waste, to share resources, materials. With the development itself, we need to make sure that where we can't achieve it now, but technology is coming, it will leave flexibility and resilience in the structure or whatever it is to allow retrofit of things when it comes and we can readapt. But we just need to do nothing is not an option. So we need to move this process on so it becomes something that is the norm as opposed to something that's subjectively added after the event.
Great, thank you very much. And with a lot of refit happening in the city, as Susan referred to earlier, very important. Lindsay, there's a question here. What do you think is the biggest blocker to us moving at pace on the decarbonisation of the city? What's the biggest barrier or blocker here?
Where to start, really? So,
right.
I mean, I think it's the scale of the challenge, and I can't help but feel the 2-degree challenge or the 1.5-degree challenge has been talked about, and you've got 12 years before species are going to disappear. 2050 still feels like an awful long way off for some folk, but the urgency is now, and the zero carbon communities work that we've done indicates that from today you would need to be deploying 4,000 electric vehicle charge points and heat pumps every single day between now and 2050 if you were going to achieve the level of change that we need in the UK. And if you take that in terms of the Glasgow scale, you'd maybe talking of roughly 10%-ish of that sort of volume. That's a lot of work, but it's also a massive opportunity. So for all the scale of the problem in itself almost feels like it's too big a nut to crack right now, the opportunity is there, and I don't doubt, given the amount of discussion that we've had this morning about innovation, aptitude, resilience and agility of the capability of the people that work in and around Glasgow and Scotland, that we are excellently placed to deal with those barriers to deployment.
Great, thank you very much. So, Ian, this question, growth and sustainability are popular themes today, but economic growth isn't sustainable. How do we plan to make the economy work for both people and planet? Very small question, but what's your perspective on that?
Do I get an award if I answer that one? Yeah. I think I kind of goes to the nub of where I started earlier. At the moment, we've had 50 years of a capitalist society. Not to be overly socialist about it, but a capitalist, unfettered capitalism, if you like, that has served a significant proportion of the world very well in terms of creating wealth and improving standard of living, but it has come at the expense of a minority of people and the planet. And I think we need to do something quite radical to change that, both in terms of how the state operates and in terms of how business, and I think, and how people approach business. I think we're starting to see some really good examples of that. We're seeing, from myself, we're seeing more private businesses and third sector organisations being willing to recruit people more flexibly, to be more open to people, to recruiting people with disabilities. But we have a huge way to go in that, in terms of where people are coming from in their mindset and how we make sure everyone is included in that growth.
Thank you. Warren, both Lindsay and Ian have talked about the urgency of much more radical interventions now, and the final question, in a sense, asks the same point. Where is the urgency in tackling the climate emergency, given we've 10 years to deliver most of the required emissions reduction? How does Circular Glasgow view that question?
Well, I think we need to be doing an awful lot more quickly. I think we as consumers, we as influencers of, if you like, what we buy, what we encourage others to do. When you go out and buy a product, do you look at the true cost of what you're actually buying? Or do you just buy the cheapest goods? I mean, it's a change in mindset in looking at what is the true cost. This is something that's been exported along with the pollution, along with the carbon impact, along with all of those other deleterious impacts. Should we be looking more closely to home? Should we be buying locally? Should we be manufacturing locally? And if you like, retaining those resources locally. I think that's something that we should be doing. And indeed, that's what I intend to be doing over the next couple of years as part of my role as an ambassador for Circular Glasgow, is trying to encourage a thinking or rethinking. We're doing this on a more through the Scottish Leather Group and influencing our supply chain and getting them, and there's some very, very big names in terms of automotive sector we supply to, in the aircraft sector, what we supply upholstery to, who are now thinking the word sustainable interiors. They're actually changing the way that they're actually putting that material or those materials into their cars, but we are influencing those decisions. I think all of those things will happen. It is slow. I think the sooner we get away from a linear manufacturing thinking, which you referred to, and get into circular thinking and buying circular products, the better, the quicker this will happen.
Great. Well, thank you all very much indeed. We're going to end this panel here, so join me in thanking Andrew Parsons, Lindsay McQuaid, Ian Bruce and Dr. Warren Bowden. Stage, our two political leaders, the Cabinet Secretary and the leader of the city. Please come back. Please welcome back to the stage Susan and Derek. Now, you won't be surprised to hear I'm not going to ask them who they are and why they're here, given that we know who they are and we know why they're here. But we do want to give you a chance to have a very direct Q&A session with our two political leaders. We can do this with the Slido questions, and I'm sure we have plenty. And if you want to put those up on the screen, you can. You can see many of them have been highly prioritised. Actually, there's a question. The question that's come out on top, there's only 4 votes for, so I'm going to wait on that for a minute, if we may, Cabinet Secretary, but the position with the budget. But this first question is about 1 in 3 children living in poverty in the city. How can we tolerate this level of neglect of the next generation? What can we do? Susan, I'm going to ask you to pick up that, if you would. And then there's a range of other questions here about deregulation of buses and public transport, and then we'll come on to homelessness. But maybe, Susan, you'd like to start with that.
I suppose my initial response is we shouldn't tolerate it ever, and we shouldn't ever get ourselves into a position where we are complacent or think that it's something to be tolerated. We need to be constantly striving to change it, and certainly in the city government in Glasgow, and I'm sure Derek and the First Minister, if she were here, would say the same about the Scottish Government. We are constantly looking for ways to increase family incomes, to lift children out of poverty, both in the short term and the immediate term. In the city, we do things like our, we've stopped calling it our holiday hunger programme, actually. That's our kind of internal shorthand. Holiday activity programme, during which the Waynes get fed while they're having fun during their holidays. The universal credit hubs that we set up to support families and identify the most vulnerable families before universal credit actually kicked in Glasgow. There's a whole range of policies and activities that I could talk about that we direct and are very strategically focused on the most vulnerable families in the city. And we know who they are because of data like free school meals eligibility, for example. That on its own is, it's not... it doesn't give you the full picture, but you can build up a picture. SIND data as well, for example. We're expanding free school meal availability in the city. We've expanded it to primary 4s, and hopefully we'll as we invest in the school estate to allow us just to be able to feed more kids physically in place, we'll expand that right through primary schools. But we are in a position, and there's no getting away from this, that we are mitigating things that are being done and being imposed from elsewhere. What I would like, and what I think our job as local government is to have a long-term view to lift people, to be lifting the poorest families, the poorest households out of poverty, lifting their head, not just lifting their heads above water, but getting them onto dry land, getting them a secure, resilient, sustainable future. Independence, economic independence for households who are able to achieve that, and decent levels of sustainable support for those who will need that extra help. But what is being done to us, whether it's Brexit or benefit cuts, or you could name a whole range of policies, means that we're almost constantly running to catch up, that we are just helping people to keep their head above water a lot of the time, and that isn't good enough. We need to be able to help people much more than we're able to, but it is very, very challenging. But to go back to the first point, we shouldn't tolerate it, and I think that we will constantly be looking for new ways, more innovative ways to work with our poorest citizens. And again, the point about collaboration and partnership is absolutely crucial, and the Council, the Chief Executive of the Council, with the political support of the administration, is leading on a city vision with our partners, our community planning partners, the NHS, the police, also the prison service, for example, focusing on what do we do as a city, how do we get together to tackle those key challenges, in-work poverty, criminal justice issues and recidivism, and the fact that too many of our citizens come into contact with criminal justice services, the vulnerability of people to homelessness, for example. We need to think about how we work differently and use our shared public resource to really focus on and tackle those challenges so that we're not constantly coming back to talking about 1 in 3 children in this city living in poverty.
Cabinet Secretary.
I just want to make a couple of really important points for me here, that in addition to everything Susan said, if I'm asked what's a personal driving mission, it is actually the creation of prosperity through meaningful, purposeful employment, because it's been my experience that unemployment, those families that have maybe had intergenerational poverty or chaotic lifestyles or whatever, a job is the most inclusive thing you can have, because you've got a reason to get up in the morning, you're part of society, you're getting paid, it should be purposeful, meaningful employment. So for me, what's the biggest thing I can do to help tackle inequality and poverty is deliver a strong, successful, prosperous economy that also shares it more fairly. That's fair work. And directly the evidence we have how to tackle child poverty, yes, is educational, health, environmental programmes and a whole host of other things. And the single biggest thing we can do for child poverty is actually some financial support, and that's exactly why we're expanding financial support for the poorest families in our country, paid for through a fair and progressive tax system that doesn't cause tax flight, that doesn't send people away because the tax regimes are different, and that might take us to the budget question we'll come to shortly. But for me, everything I've spoken about this morning, about ensuring we have a successful economy, delivering prosperity and tackling inequality go hand in hand. You make the wrong choices and you impede, frankly, the sustainable economic growth agenda, you have less ability to tackle the endemic inequality that we'll face.
Thank you very much. So, Cabinet Secretary, I was going to ask you to come to this question first, which is about the River Clyde. And then I think what we could do, Susan, is ask you to come back to homelessness. Then I'll ask both of you to talk about transport and budget. But this question is really right to the heart of the announcement that you made in your speech, Cabinet Secretary. It says the River Clyde's the greatest untapped development opportunity in the country. How can we capitalise on it? You've already said what you're announcing. I suppose the question is, what do you believe can be achieved?
I think there's a few things in what I've announced this morning. First of all, in strategically saying that the Clyde mission is important, then features in other government decisions and propositions. That's the National Planning Framework, that's the Economic Action Plan, that's budget considerations, and also then how other partners respond. But what it's doing, what you've heard this morning, is everyone saying what fantastic things are going on, and if there were more private sector speakers, they would be saying about what their companies and what their investors are doing in the city as well. So we can bring together those individual investments to show the totality of good things that are happening in the region, and then use that to attract further investment. So when I go to the world's largest property and investment conference in the world, you always get a bit of bad press because you've gone to Cannes, right? That just goes with the job. But if you knew that an investment like Barclays deciding to invest 2,500 new jobs in Glasgow, £400 million, those kind of conversations happen at that conference, Glasgow should be there, Scotland should be there, and we shouldn't be ashamed about going to where decisions are taken, where the money is and where the decision makers are, to make sure that we have that leverage. So I make the point, and now building this mission, we showcase what's going on, and then we identify the gaps. What could we be doing? And those that were here last year would recall that I was as frustrated as the council leader and some others about some of the vacant and derelict land, which has been allowed to remain sterilised, and maybe some rather interesting planning applications that will never go forward has meant that there's been no development on fantastic sites that I've described. What I'm trying to do is use the body heat of what's going on that's really good to propel and promote what's going on, and then address what else could be done, and also tackle the constraints such as flooding and other matters that if we don't address together, you can't have any sort of remediation development. I want to come back to the growth question. Is all growth bad? No, it's not. You can have intelligent growth. We can have carbon neutral houses, for example. We can decarbonise the transport system. There's a whole host of things we can do that helps tackle it. National Manufacturing Institute will be a new building. Is that a bad thing? Well, no, especially if you've tasked the National Manufacturing Institute to help design the technologies of the future that reduce carbon from manufacturing. So we can still be a manufacturing and exporting country, but we're doing it along the safe climate and environmental agenda as well. So it's not just a growth is bad, good growth is intelligent, sustainable growth, and we should be very focused on that as well.
Thank you very much indeed. So, Council Leader, will you pick up this question about homelessness? How will Glasgow tackle its significant homeless problem? And after this, if you both agree, I think we'll go into buses and metro and transport issues. Yeah.
And so this is probably one of the biggest priorities that we have in the city just now. But it's one of those ones that it doesn't just sit on its own. It's not separate from some of these other issues that we've talked about, the challenges and stresses and pressures that people have in their lives. The consequences of often severe mental health problems, the consequences of addiction, how often these things go together. Glasgow's homelessness problem, and particularly the people who are homeless who are either have experienced rough sleeping or are adjacent to rough sleeping, and that's a subset and a minority of homeless people in the city, but it's a very important one. These are often people who have very complex problems in their lives, the kind of chaotic lives that Derek referred to, and that's often been as a consequence of some of these deeply ingrained social problems that Glasgow has experienced. Really, almost in the post-war era, certainly since the deindustrialisation that began in the 1970s and 80s, and it's become generational. So we need systems in place that understand the pressures that lead people to the point where they become homeless. Sometimes that's relatively straightforward. Sometimes it is relationship breakdown, and what we just need to do is move people into accommodation. But the approach that we are taking, along with the Scottish Government, is looking at making our homelessness services much more targeted and on the problem in front of us, the problem of the individual or the family that we're looking at. So if the individual that we're facing that has come to us looking for help has a history of mental health problems, for example, but haven't been able to get the treatment, or indeed often haven't sought treatment for that, our response then is about wrapping the right services around that person so that we can sustain them into a tenancy and they can keep that tenancy. The same with addiction. It used to be in the city that, not just in the city, indeed, right across, not just Scotland, right across the UK, that if someone had addiction issues, they wouldn't be moved into temporary accommodation or be given a home until they'd sorted out the addiction issues. But then, of course, their state of homelessness continues to fuel addiction. The Housing First approach now that we are pioneering in Glasgow, and which the Scottish Government is rolling out across Scotland and is supporting us, turns that on its head, and it says get somebody into a home and then you wrap that support around them as much as possible and support them in that tenancy. Essentially, it's about saying to people, what do you need in your life? What's going to make the difference for you that will keep you out of homelessness, that we can lift you out of homelessness and then keep you out of homelessness? We're working very closely with third sector partners in doing that as well. And in the coming weeks, you'll hear more about a new approach to homelessness services across the city, which is an alliancing model led by the City Council, but working in very close partnership with third sector partners, so that we make sure that every level and every manifestation of homelessness, that we have a solution in place. And of course, the other side of it, enormously important, is that we are building more affordable homes and better quality and higher standard affordable homes than we've been building in this city for decades probably. And again, that is in partnership with the Scottish Government, who have that funding commitment. It's almost, if we have land available in this city, we are building affordable homes on it as quickly as we are able to do so. And that is ultimately what we need. Decent homes to move people into, that they can afford to stay in, and that where necessary we wrap the services and support round about them to make sure that they are supported in that continued tenancy. It's clear that the way that things were done in the city around homelessness for a long time didn't address the quite unique challenges that Glasgow has around homelessness, which aren't really replicated in other parts of Scotland, certainly not to the same scale. So we are changing our services in order to reflect the needs of the people who come to us looking for help. And perhaps even more importantly, the people who never do come to us looking for help, because they don't approach us for help, we go out and find them and offer them the help now.
Great, thank you very much.
You want to move on to connectivity?
I was going to ask you if we could move on to Metro.
Okay.
You might want to say something about budget first, I guess that's part of it. And then, Susan, this question about re-regulating buses. But Cabinet Secretary first on the big picture.
Yeah, and as briefly as I can, so we can cover as many questions as you might wish to pose. On the budget, I found out, like everyone else on Tuesday, UK Government have put the budget back again. That's 4 months delay. UK budget will be on the 11th of March. The complexities of the Scottish budget would generally require the UK Government budget to go first because it drives a lot of our numbers. However, between the 11th of March and the 1st of April, the start of the financial year, to try and do a budget in that timescale is incredibly challenging. So in the face of the irresponsibility of the UK Government, I'll act with the responsibility as Scotland's Finance Secretary and hopefully have a sense of responsibility and consensus from other opposition parties to help deliver a budget for Scotland that gives competence and certainty, confidence, and can give local authority partners, third sector partners, businesses and taxpayers certainty as well. So I'm considering my options. I'll engage with opposition parties and I'll probably say something sooner rather than later as what I propose to do with the Scottish Budget Day and process, but you'll appreciate I won't do it here and now because there's some further engagement to be had as I consider the options and engage with Treasury to have absolute confidence around the numbers, which then takes you to what you spend the money on and deliberately to transport. But before I do that, because a lot of rate-paying businesses in the conference, in the gathering, and I would want to make the point that actually we're really competitive in non-domestic rates. They're sometimes called business rates. We're more competitive than the rest of the UK. We've got more relief than the rest of the UK, small business bonus, for example. And we've got things that the rest of the UK doesn't have. Growth accelerator. You build new property in Scotland, you build speculative property, you pay no rates at all until first occupation. You've got a period of grace. Doesn't exist anywhere else in the UK. So when we're actually trying to encourage people to come and invest in Scotland, we should showcase some of the fantastic incentives that we have. So I want to deliver a budget that, of course, helps tackle the issues of investment and inequality, but also a competitive tax regime to ensure it's still the best place in the UK to do business. Now, in terms of connectivity then, I think if you just ask me direct, what's the difference between the current Metro plans and the previous ones that haven't happened? I would say this. So far, what I've seen, they're more credible, they have more benefits, and they're more deliverable. Now, there's still a process of work to go through, and I maybe say that more as a constituency member, put my cards on the table. I represent Remshire North, and the route fundamentally could come through Remshire North. But even see that. See if we get the airport to rail station at Gilmer Street right, and you can do that bit now without having to do the whole project. The heavy rail project required you to do everything right through to Central Station. So there are many reasons I think this feels as if it has more buy-in. The Chambers of Commerce have welcomed it, the airport's welcomed it, both council leaders have welcomed it, the wider City Cabinet, I imagine, is going to be supportive.
I would hope so. We haven't had the meeting yet.
All regional colleagues. So it feels to me as if this is a really credible start, and because of the way it could be profiled and delivered, the money's there to start. So I'm confident that the timescales that we had will be able to make quicker progress. And as I say, some of that's maybe as a constituency member, but what I've said probably, I know concurs, because I was in First Minister's questions this week, concurs with what the First Minister has said and what we said in the programme for government, subject to all the business cases. Final point is, there will be a lot of money in capital there will be a lot of money for infrastructure. We've said that already. I'm raising the levels of infrastructure spend in our country. With the infrastructure investment plan, with the advice around climate change, clearly it should be with a sustainability focus. Already we've committed £500 million to bus. Glasgow is a prime candidate for some of that capital investment around bus infrastructure. I saw the question, do we need to re-regulate the buses? No, we don't need to re-regulate the buses, but by the way, councils, because of the transport bill, will have more powers. But if we give buses priority, frankly, over other vehicles, then it'll be more attractive to use, amongst a whole host of other things you can do to make public transport more attractive. We're doing it on rail. Queen Street, I think, will be fantastic. Electrification, further investment in rail. But the Connectivity Commission's #1 issue was Metro. So let's make that happen. Let's get the work done, make it happen, and there will be money in the budget for capital investment on infrastructure, including, as I say, bus prioritisation, and Glasgow is an ideal candidate to get a good share of that if they have the propositions in good time.
Great, thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. So, Susan, you may want to add anything on buses, which was the specific of the question, but there is a question here about Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities and organisations and how they participate in inclusive growth, which I don't want to ignore. And then I think we might end on COP26, if you're happy to do that. So anything to add on buses?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we were going to design a bus service and bus system that worked for the City of Glasgow, we wouldn't start with what we've got now and the kind of legacy that we've inherited. But we are where we are with it. And as Derek said, re-regulation is often presented as the answer to everything. It isn't necessarily, which isn't to say that I don't necessarily find it an attractive option. And certainly the power now exists for local authorities to go forward with the option of local franchising, and it's there to use if other options don't work out. But what we've done in Glasgow is something I think actually could have been done quite a long time ago, is established a partnership with our bus operators and set some parameters and said, here's what we need. Here's what we need from you, and here's what we'll give in return. So the first focus from them has been clean buses. We've said, here's the low emission zone, here's the targets, here's what our expectations are of you, deliver clean buses, and they've done it. They've met their target for the first year, and I fully expect that they will, by the end of this year, the buses will have to be more than half the fleet will have to be within the regulatory standards for the low emission zone. We are going to talk about routes, we're going to talk about fares, and we're going to talk about frequency and speed, and that's the bit that's in our hands as a City Council, which again we probably could have done before, and it's that bus prioritisation that Derek's talking about. So we're saying, right, in return to you, bus companies, for taking on some of these issues that really consumers and passengers and people who just now are not bus passengers. I think it's important to say Glasgow has experienced, more than any other city in the UK, a precipitous decline in bus use. Bus use in Glasgow has gone off a cliff over the past 20, 30 years. We want to try and turn that around. And it's in the interest of the bus companies to try and turn that around as well. We will focus on green routes, on bus prioritisation routes. One of the reasons why people don't use buses is because they think they're not reliable, because the journeys aren't fast enough, because they get caught up in congestion. We tackle the congestion, we make the bus much more attractive as a mode of transport for people. But the franchising option, the regulation option, is there for us to use as a stick if the carrot doesn't work. I would rather deliver it in partnership if we can, because it isn't cheap, the franchising option necessarily, and we've got lots of other things we want to spend our money on in Glasgow. But I think we've got the ability to make significant progress on bus over the next year or so. I think we've already made progress. On BAME communities in the city, incredibly important. We are part of the Inclusive Cities Partnership, We were one of the first 5 cities in the UK to take part in that, and in actual fact I think Glasgow is increasingly looked at as leading the way, and our focus in Glasgow is very much on economic inclusion. It is about saying who are the communities in Glasgow, whether they're geographical communities or communities of interest, who are excluded just now from being able to access economic opportunities, and BAME citizens are very, very high on that list. So we have a big focus, again, working in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, with the colleges, and with BAME-led businesses in the city, as well as schools. The head teacher of Shawlands Academy was involved in the initial steering group of the Inclusive Cities programme, focusing on what specific focus do we give to making sure that people from those parts of our community are not denied opportunities. What do we have to do to make the difference there? So it's something that's very much at the forefront of our minds as part of our wider inclusive growth strategy.
Thank you very much indeed. Now, to our 2 leaders, we promised them a 1 o'clock departure. We're right on 1 o'clock, so I'm going to ask you for a final remark on this final question, which is looking forward to 10 months' time, 170 world leaders here in Scotland, here in Glasgow. What do we need to do to make everybody proud and also to accelerate Glasgow's role in achieving, a sustainable planet? Cabinet Secretary.
So what I've learned with my engagement from business, including companies who I've convinced to stay or invest in Scotland, is this. Yes, the political leaders are coming and we'll have the political debate and hopefully the leadership about how ambitious Scotland is. That's great. We'll do that. We'll promote all of that. Here's the opportunity bit for the people in the room. A lot of companies come too. A lot of global international companies want to do the right thing, will be coming to here. So what is it we need to do then? So governments, I took the point from the question, it's for governments to lead on the issue, but we won't come up with the solutions. In fact, if we do, we might get it wrong. That's where business and industry and academia and experts come together to say, and here's the things you need to do. So just as the politicians come, so do the world's businesses and business attention. I think one of the biggest opportunities we can have from this is not just a political positioning and putting Scotland and Glasgow on the map, but actually seizing the economic opportunity from climate emergency by saying, and here's the things we're doing in Scotland and we can export that to you. So work on what are the solutions now. Don't wait for government to tell you this is how you fix a widget in a machine to reduce your carbon output. We won't get that right. We might have to set targets that are binding. You'll have to do the innovation to get there. So if we get that right, sell it to the world, and that's a good thing to do. Save the planet and sustainable jobs in Scotland, and we will have that opportunity this year.
Thank you very much. Susan, the final word?
Well, I think COP25 showed us that we actually can rely on or trust states and national governments to deliver what's needed. If Glasgow is going to be mentioned in the same breath as Kyoto and Paris, and it will, we will have Glasgow Accords or a Glasgow Agreement emerge from COP26. We want it to be a good one, and we want the name Glasgow to have positive associations when it's used around the world in this context. So we're not just going to sit back and wait and see if the national governments and the states do the right thing. And something I learned on a very flying visit, a brief visit to COP25 in Madrid, reinforced my understanding that it's what they call the non-state actors who are absolutely crucial in this, and that's cities, it is business and industry, and it's civil society, acting and basically saying, do you know what, government? You will argue over where the decimal point goes and how much ground you're going to give in reparations for loss and damage already sustained by climate change. We're going to go on with it. And I said in my contribution earlier that cities are going to lead the way, and COP26 here in Glasgow, the role of cities and the ability of cities to make the difference. Humans make climate change, and cities are where all the humans are, or most of the humans are. So it just makes sense. We've got the economies of scale to deliver solutions that will actually make the difference. We shouldn't sit about and wait for national governments to lead the way. We should be doing it and leading on it and doing it in partnership with the private sector and with civil society, because that's how we then shame national governments into stepping up and doing their bit and making sure that they give us the legislative frameworks and indeed the resource that will make it better. The final thing I would say is, please just go out and tell everybody about COP26. Tell them it is coming to Glasgow. Tell them to prepare. If you're a business, tell them to get ready, but don't panic about it. It is going to be different. It's not going to be business as usual. But we'll keep the city moving, but it is going to be different. But what you will get in return for the disruption, I think, is going to be amazing. I'm incredibly excited about it. It's going to be a huge challenge. It's a little bit terrifying as well. But what this city will gain from it, what our people will gain from it, the potential that we've got, not just to put Glasgow on the world stage, but to demonstrate that we are a world leader, that will be worth that few days of disruption. I absolutely believe that. So spread the word about COP26.
Now, this has been the biggest ever State of the City Economy conference, and it's also, by my reckoning, in the last 10 years, been the longest one that we've had. So I want to start with...
Is that a particular reference to our answers?
No. But I want to start with a round of applause for the staying power of the audience. So let's give you a round of applause. Well done. And then a big ovation for our two inspiring political leaders who've set out, I think, an incredibly compelling vision, not just for the year ahead, but for the decade that it will start. So please join me in thanking Councillor Susan Aitken, Cabinet Secretary Derek Mackay. Enjoy the rest of the day.